His power is worthless.
The goddess who summoned me to another world took one look at my rank and sentenced me to death. E rank, the weakest hero ever measured. My skills: paralyze, poison, sleep. She called them garbage, not worth keeping a hero alive for. She teleported me to a dungeon no one had ever escaped, and forgot I existed. That was her mistake. But this story doesn't start in a dungeon. It starts on a school bus, on the last normal day of my life. Our class was winding through the mountains on a trip, and most of us were doing what we always did: sleeping, scrolling, pretending the world outside the window didn't exist. Class 2C had a hierarchy, and everyone knew their place in it. Kirihara Takudo sat at the center, handsome, effortless, the kind of guy who changed the mood of a room just by talking. Koyamada orbited him like a satellite, loud and aggressive, picking fights to prove he belonged near the top. That day, his target was Togawa Ayaka. She'd been reading a romance novel, quietly, privately, bothering no one. Koyamada snatched it out of her hands and held it up like a trophy, laughing about the cover. She told him to give it back. He told her to approve his messaging app request first. She refused. He kept it. Nobody moved. The teacher glanced up, muttered something about not causing problems on his watch, and went back to his phone. The class watched like it was television. I don't know why I stood up. That's not true. I know exactly why. It wasn't bravery. I'd spent my whole life as a background character, the kind of person whose name nobody remembers at reunions. I had no friends in this class, no status, no reason for anyone to care what I thought. But there was something about the sound of her voice when she said stop, something tight and desperate underneath the anger. I'd heard that sound before. Growing up in a house where the walls were thin and the yelling was loud, I'd heard it more times than I could count. That specific pitch, someone asking for help while pretending they didn't need any. My body moved before my brain caught up. "She's seriously telling you to stop," I said. My voice cracked. My palms were sweating. "Just give it back." The bus went quiet. Koyamada stared at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. Then he laughed. This sharp, barking sound that made my stomach drop. He called me cool. He called me a hero. The sarcasm was thick enough to choke on. Kirihara, without even looking up from his headphones, told Koyamada to return the book. Just like that. One sentence, and the whole thing was over. Koyamada apologized with a grin that wasn't sorry at all, and Togawa took her novel back. She didn't look at me, not right away. But later, just for a second, she turned her head, and our eyes met. There was surprise in her expression. Maybe gratitude. Maybe just confusion that someone like me had bothered. I sat back down and stared at my knees, hoping the heat in my face would fade before anyone noticed. Then the white light hit, no warning, no sound. One second I was watching the mountains scroll by the window, and the next, the entire bus was swallowed in blinding white. Students screamed. Someone grabbed my arm. The light was everywhere. Not warm, not cold, just absolute. And then it was gone. We woke up on a stone floor. Cold air, torchlight, walls that looked centuries old. The entire class was there. 30-something students and our teacher, sprawled across the ground in a room that smelled like damp rock and something metallic I couldn't name. A woman was waiting for us. She stood at the far end of the room, calm, as if she'd been expecting us for hours. Long white hair, golden eyes, a thin tiara that caught the torchlight. She wore a robe that looked like something out of a painting, flowing, luminous, deliberately beautiful. When she spoke, her voice carried the absolute certainty of someone who had never been told no. She told us we were heroes, summoned to save her world. The great demon emperor had returned, and only we could stop him. If we wanted to go home, we needed to defeat him and obtain something called the evil king essence. She said this the way a teacher explains homework: routine, rehearsed, matter of fact. Koyamada exploded. He screamed about kidnapping. He called it a prank. He got close enough to grab her, but something about her eyes stopped him. Our teacher stood up, brushed off his pants, and told everyone to calm down. He told us to listen, to cooperate. To prove this wasn't a dream, the goddess had a bound man dragged into the room, a prisoner in rags, chained at the wrists. Then, a soldier brought in a wolf, but not any wolf I'd ever seen. 3 eyes, golden irises, wine-red fur that looked like dried blood. The thing was massive, muscles coiling under its pelt. The goddess pointed at the wolf. She said animals like this didn't exist in our world. Koyamada yelled that it was fake, a prop. She gave a signal. The wolf lunged. The prisoner screamed, one raw, shredded sound that cut off wet. Students shrieked. Someone vomited. I couldn't look away. The sound of teeth on bone was something I knew I'd carry for the rest of my life. Then, the goddess raised her hand, spoke a chant I didn't understand, and white fire erupted from a magic circle on her palm. The wolf was ash in seconds. The room smelled like burning hair and charred meat. Nobody called it a prank after that. Nobody called it anything. Some students were crying. Others had gone pale and silent. The room smelled like ash and terror, and the goddess stood in the center of it with not a single hair out of place. This was our new reality, and she owned every inch of it. One by one, we were told to touch a crystal, a translucent stone on a pedestal that measured something the goddess called our potential. Kirihara went first. The crystal glowed gold, so bright it shattered. S rank, the goddess announced, clapping her hands like a child at a birthday party. The highest grade, magnificent. Togawa touched it next, silver light. The crystal turned to dust, another S rank. The robed men standing behind the goddess exchanged stunned whispers. 2 S ranks in one summoning was unheard of. One of the Toka sisters, the older one, calm and analytical as a surgeon, released white light that filled the room. 3 S ranks. The goddess was glowing brighter than the crystal. Koyamada got A rank, red light, and immediately started boasting about his era arriving. And Tamahiro placed his hand on the crystal, and it turned black. Dark smoke rose from the surface, like something alive. The robed men panicked. The goddess compared the reaction to a legendary figure, the Dark Hero, the strongest man in history, and was declared A rank, and something behind his eyes changed. His posture straightened, his voice dropped. He looked at Koyamada and called him an equal. No honorifics, no deference. A confrontation started, and the goddess shut it down with magic circles blazing on both arms. Then, it was my turn. I walked up to the pedestal. My reflection in the crystal's surface looked small, unremarkable. The same face I'd seen in bathroom mirrors my entire life. The one nobody noticed, nobody remembered, nobody cared about. My hand touched cold glass, a faint purple glow, barely visible, like a candle behind frosted glass. The weakest result of anyone in the class. Not dramatic, not devastating, just small. The goddess didn't even look at me. "Next person, please," she said, already turning away. I stood there, my hand still on the crystal, my mouth open. She was already talking to someone else. The robed men didn't gasp. The classmates didn't whisper. Nobody reacted at all. It was like I hadn't even touched it. E rank, the lowest grade. HP +3, MP +33. My status screen was almost empty. While Kirihara's stats looked like a cheat code, mine looked like a clerical error. My inherent skill read, status abnormality granting, usable. That word saved me from complete despair. For about 10 minutes, my skill tree grew downward instead of up. Everyone else's branched toward the sky like a tree reaching for sunlight. Mine burrowed into the dark. 3 skills waited at level 1, paralysis, sleep, poison. I didn't know what they meant yet. I just knew they were mine, and nobody else wanted them. I went to find the goddess, to ask what my skills meant. But before I reached her, I heard her voice from behind a stone pillar, talking to someone I couldn't see. "There seems to be one person with the lowest E rank," she said. The other voice asked what she planned to do about it. "Don't worry," she said. Her tone was light, almost cheerful. "Even the lowest rank has its uses." The number of soldiers in the room increased by 30. I counted. Their eyes followed me specifically. We were led to a new chamber, a room with a magic circle carved into the floor. The teacher tried to organize the class, but half the students ignored him. He was D rank. His authority had evaporated the moment the crystal measured him. The goddess called my name first. A soldier shoved me forward with the flat of his scabbard. I stumbled into the center of the circle. When I looked up, the goddess was smiling. She explained it simply. E rank heroes were disposed of, teleported to a place called the Disposal Ruins, a dungeon where criminals and worthless summons were sent to die. No one had ever survived. The marker at the entrance had never changed. My stomach dropped through the floor. My ears were ringing. Disposal. The word echoed in my skull like a stone dropped in a well. This wasn't punishment. It wasn't even cruelty. It was cleanup. Efficient, casual, administrative cleanup. If you're enjoying this story so far, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. And drop a comment with the city you're watching from. Let's see how far this story reaches. I tried to argue. I told her my status abnormality skill was labeled usable. I told her it could inflict paralysis and poison. She scratched her head, actually scratched her head, like I was a child asking why the sky wasn't green, and dismissed it. Status ailment skills had no value in this world. Low success rates, weak effects, short durations, not worth keeping a hero alive for. Kirihara spoke from the crowd. "If you're going to disappear, hurry up and disappear, E rank." The girls around him giggled. Koyamada laughed so hard he bent over. Then An walked up to me. He put his hands on my shoulders, leaned close. For a moment, I thought he was going to say something kind. The one decent gesture in this entire nightmare. His whisper was ice. He told me to call him Ansan now, because I was the bottom tier E class, and he was A rank. He said he'd always known this would happen, that one day he'd be above everyone. He said he used to see me watching him get bullied by Koyamada, and he hated me for it. Not Koyamada, me. Because I had the audacity to feel sorry for him. Live out your short remaining time diligently, he said, smiling. Discarded hero. He turned back to the class and told them I wouldn't listen to his parting words. They laughed. They all laughed. The goddess threw something at me, a leather bag, my unique item. Every hero got one. She'd already tested it, injected it with magical essence. All it did was glow, the most pathetic unique item she'd ever seen. She held me up to the class like a prop. Look at what the lowest rank gets. Look at what happens to the weak. Feel better about yourselves. You're not him. It worked. I could see it in their faces. Relief, superiority, gratitude that the sacrifice was someone else. Then a voice cut through the crowd. Wait. Togawa Ayaka stepped forward. Her fists were clenched at her sides. This is wrong. Mimori is our classmate. The teacher tried to grab her arm, stammering about the situation being different. She shook him off. The goddess moved. I barely saw it. One moment, she was standing 10 feet away. The next, she was in front of Togawa, a feint with her hand, then a fist buried in Togawa's stomach. The S-rank girl dropped. The goddess had the strength to flatten any of us, and she'd just proven it. Togawa collapsed, eyes wide, unable to breathe. Students rushed to her side. The Takao sisters stood, looked at the scene, and walked out of the room. The older one said something about bad taste. The younger one called us trash. The robed men tried to stop them. The goddess waved them off. Nobody else moved. The magic circle was glowing beneath my feet. Archers had arrows knocked. Robed men had their hands extended, holding whatever spell kept the circle active. Something inside me cracked, not broke, cracked, like ice on a river in spring. Something I'd been holding down my entire life, pressing flat, keeping quiet so nobody would notice me, so I could be harmless, so I could survive. I tried Paralyze on the goddess. Nothing happened. Her lips curled. She told me she had a divine protection, an automatic defense that nullified status ailment spells. She said it like she was explaining why the vending machine wouldn't take my crumpled bill. Kirihara fired his golden dragon roar wave at the wall beside me. The stone cracked. He told me to disappear, but I was done being quiet, done being invisible, done being the background character who kept his head down and swallowed every insult, because making noise would only make things worse. I'd spent my whole life being told I was nothing by people who were supposed to love me. This goddess was just the latest in a long line, and she would be the last. I looked at her golden eyes, and her perfect, condescending smile, and I told her exactly what I thought of her. Drop dead, I said. You shit goddess. The room went silent. I memorized every face. Kirihara's sneer, Anne's smirk, Koyamada's grin, the classmates who laughed, the teacher who looked away, Togawa on the floor, unconscious, the only person who'd tried. If I come back alive, I said, be prepared. The teleportation circle blazed white. The light swallowed me from the feet up, climbing my legs, my chest, my arms. The last thing they saw was my hand, middle finger raised, steady as a blade. The goddess's smile cracked, just for a second, just enough. Please die miserably, she said. Toka Mimori. The last thing I saw was Togawa on the floor, unconscious, the only person who'd stood up for me, the same way I'd stood up for her on that bus. The only difference was that nobody punched me for trying. Then, darkness. Total, absolute darkness. No sound, no light, no warmth, just the cold stone of whatever dungeon they'd thrown me into, and the faint purple glow of a leather bag resting against my chest. The one thing I had left in the world. It only knew how to shine. That made two of us. The darkness was total, not dark like a room with the lights off, dark like the inside of a coffin. No shapes, no edges, no sense of up or down, just black, pressing in from every direction, heavy as water. I lay on cold stone and listened to my own breathing. So this was the disposal ruins, 0 survival rate, the place where every person the goddess had thrown away came to die. And here I was, E rank, level 1, 3 skills nobody wanted, and a leather bag that only knew how to glow. The bag. I reached for it, found the gem at its center, and pushed a thread of magical essence into it. The gem pulsed, faint purple light, barely enough to see 3 feet in any direction. But in this kind of darkness, something was everything. I held the bag up and looked around. Stone walls, uneven ground. The air smelled like wet rock and something metallic, and scattered across the floor, half buried in dust. Bones. A skull, split clean in half. A ribcage, crushed flat. People had died here. A lot of people. The flashback hit without warning. My father's boot in my ribs. My mother standing over me, telling me she should have killed me when she had the chance. The sound of beer cans hitting the kitchen wall. The phone call, my father's voice, slurring, telling my uncle he was leaving the kid. The click of the line going dead. My uncle and aunt took me in after that. They were warm, patient. They taught me what it felt like to be treated like a person instead of a punching bag. I decided then that I would be invisible, harmless, a background character at the edges of other people's stories. That plan had worked for 15 years, and now I was lying in a death dungeon because gods measured your worth with a crystal and threw you away if you didn't shine bright enough. Something moved behind me. I heard it before I saw it. A wet, hissing sound, like acid eating through metal. The air got warmer, thicker. I turned around, and the bag's faint glow caught the shape of something massive standing at the edge of the light. A bull's head, golden eyes, dark skin laced with orange veins that pulsed like a heartbeat. Its body was humanoid, but wrong. Too thick, too muscular, acid oozing from holes across its chest and arms. Wherever the liquid hit the ground, the stone sizzled and dissolved. A minotaur, and it was looking directly at me. My body locked. The thing was between me and the only passage. The acid blocked every other direction. My legs wouldn't move. My heart was slamming so hard I could feel it in my teeth. The minotaur took a step forward, then another, slow, deliberate, like it knew I had nowhere to go. I was going to die. The thought arrived clean and simple, the way the worst truths do. I was going to die in this hole, and nobody would ever know. Not my uncle, not my aunt, not Togawa, still unconscious on that stone floor. The mocking voices came back. Kirihara telling me to disappear, Koyamada's laughter, Anne's whisper about living out my remaining time diligently, the goddess's parting gift, please die miserably. Something hot rose in my chest, not courage, rage, the same rage that had cracked open inside me when the teleportation circle swallowed me whole. The minotaur reached for my head. Paralyze, I said. I didn't expect anything. The goddess herself had told me these skills were useless. Low success rates, weak effects, barely worth mentioning. But my right hand shot forward, and the word left my mouth before my brain could stop it. The minotaur stopped, not slowed, not staggered, stopped. Every muscle in its body seized at once, like someone had flipped a switch. A yellow gauge appeared above its head, a status bar, slowly ticking down. The acid still dripped from its skin, but the monster itself was frozen solid, one hand inches from my face. Fingers still curled around the air where my skull would have been. For 3 full seconds, I just stood there and stared at it. It worked. My worthless skill worked. I ran, scrambled past the paralyzed minotaur, slipping on acid-wet stone, not caring which direction I went as long as it was away. My lungs were burning, but my mind was racing over a single impossible fact. The goddess said these skills wouldn't work. She either lied or she was wrong, and either way, I was still alive. Then the second monster appeared. This one had a bird's head, a massive crest or horns above its skull, 4 humanoid arms, the same black skin with orange veins. It screamed at me with a sound that wasn't a word, but carried the same message as everything else in this dungeon. You don't belong here. You're food. Paralyze, I said again. It froze, same as the minotaur. Complete motor shutdown, twice, against 2 completely different monsters. This wasn't luck. My skill tree grew downward, into depth instead of breadth. The goddess's crystal couldn't evaluate something that operated outside the normal system. Every skill I had was abnormally effective because the measurement that declared me worthless was measuring the wrong thing. I might be able to survive this. I found an alcove and checked my status. MP was almost gone, 1 out of 33. Paralyze cost 10 MP per cast. I'd used it 3 times. My correction values barely existed, but self-generated MP, the reserves the system didn't display, might still have something left. I crept back to the bird head, still paralyzed. I threw a rock at it, no reaction. Paralysis didn't break on damage. I tried a dead hero's axe on its body. The blade shattered on impact, and the acid ate through the handle in seconds. No weapons would work on these things, only my skills. I was shaking. My MP was nearly gone, but if I could just kill one of them, the experience might push me to level 2. And if leveling up restored MP, poison, I said, aiming at the paralyzed bird head. Purple light spread across the monster's skin. No gauge this time. Poison was a different system, a damage over time effect that stacked on top of paralysis. The birdhead's body started twitching, its muscles spasming under skin that was turning a sickly violet. When the paralysis wore off and the minotaur came charging back, I hit it with sleep. It dropped like a puppet with cut strings. Blue gauge this time. Different system, different biological target. Sleep disabled consciousness, while Paralyze locked motor function. They didn't cancel each other. They compounded. More monsters came. A horde. golden eyes in the dark, 20 or more, acid hissing on the ground, surrounding me from both sides. My MP was at 0. My vision was going gray at the edges. I could feel consciousness draining out of me like water through a cracked glass. I paralyzed the ones at the front. 8 of them turned into a wall of frozen bodies blocking the rest. I used every scrap of MP I had left, even the reserves the system couldn't measure. My legs gave out. My vision narrowed to a pinhole. I was about to lose consciousness in a room full of things that wanted to eat me. Then the bird head died. The poison had done its work, and the experience that flooded into me was wrong. Not wrong as in bad. Wrong as in the number didn't make sense. The notification filled my vision. Level 1 to level 258. 257 levels. From 1 kill. MP recovery on level up hit like adrenaline. My head cleared, my body surged, and my vision snapped back into focus. My skills leveled up to 2, and I gained something new. Multi-target casting. I could hit 8 enemies at once. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just started killing. Paralyze. 8 frozen. Poison. 8 dying. Sleep. On the Minotaur. Backup when the paralysis wore off. More monsters died from poison. My level jumped to 321, then 395, then 507. MP recovered every time I leveled up, and each level made my skills hit harder, last longer, reach further. The monsters stopped coming toward me. The Minotaurs retreated first. The bird heads followed, panicking, trampling each other in the dark. The things that had been hunting me 5 minutes ago were running. From me, from the E rank, from the kid the goddess threw away. I let them go. I wasn't here to chase. I was here to survive, but my hands were shaking, and it wasn't from fear anymore. I sat against the wall and let the silence settle. Level 507, skills at level 2 with multi-target capability. MP pool from 33 to over 13,000. The monsters here were designed to kill heroes, high level, lethal, unstoppable by any E rank's normal abilities. But the system never accounted for someone whose skills actually worked. Each kill gave massive experience because of the level gap. She'd built a death trap, and she'd accidentally stocked it with the fastest leveling ground in existence. For me, only for me. I'd have laughed if I wasn't so hungry. Hunger, thirst, the 2 problems I hadn't solved. I explored the dungeon looking for anything edible, but every monster corpse was acidic inside. I cut one open, and the fumes nearly blinded me. No water sources anywhere, just endless dark stone and the sound of acid eating through rock. The dungeon wasn't just designed to kill you in combat, it was designed to starve you afterward. Thorough, efficient, the goddess's handiwork through and through. Hours in the dark, with nothing to eat or drink. The monotony was its own kind of torture. Rock, rock, more rock, no landmarks. Just the gray sameness that made your thoughts loop until you couldn't tell if you'd been walking for an hour or a day. Then I noticed the bag. The gem had changed color. When I'd last injected MP, it had turned gray after producing the faint light. Now the bottom was showing purple, like ink seeping into water. I pushed magical essence into it, slowly this time, watching the color shift. Purple spread upward through the gem, then gray overtook it, and from inside the bag, I felt weight appear where there had been nothing. I reached in and pulled out a bottle of cola, 500 milliliters, plastic cap, condensation on the outside. Then a bag of beef jerky, sealed, labeled in Japanese. I sat on the stone floor of a death dungeon in another world, holding a bottle of cola and a bag of beef jerky from a convenience store back home. And for a long time, I couldn't move. The goddess's mockery item, the pathetic leather bag that only knew how to glow. It produced food from my original world when you fed it MP. She either didn't know what it could do, or she didn't bother to check. Because why would she waste time understanding the garbage she was throwing away? I drank the cola. The carbonation burned my throat, and it was the best thing I'd ever tasted. I ate the jerky, saving 3 pieces for later, and sat there with tears running down my face. Not because I was sad, because the thing that was supposed to be my final humiliation was keeping me alive. The bag needed cooldown between uses, but it worked. The goddess's insult had saved my life. I kept going, upward, always upward, through caverns with poisonous swamps and bone pits, through tunnels where dragon zombies lurked, massive undead things with rotting flesh that glowed orange, acid drool, bone wings. I paralyzed them, poisoned them, put them to sleep. My level climbed, 5 out of 49, 665, 692. The bag produced rice balls and green tea on the next recharge, yakisoba bread and vegetable juice the one after that. I rationed everything. I slept in the hollowed out ribcage of a dragon zombie, bone fragments scattered around the entrance as a makeshift alarm. The lizardmen were the worst, not the strongest, but the cruelest, intelligent enough to use tools, and sadistic enough to mock the dead. When I found them, they were playing with human skeletons like puppets, imitating the dying screams of the people whose bones they wore as trophies. They saw me and laughed. They mimicked human begging. They thought it was funny. I paralyzed them. I poisoned them. I killed every single one. And when it was over, I placed the human skulls in a niche in the cave wall. A small tribute, nothing that mattered to anyone except the dead and me. And I noticed something. I was smiling, not a grin, not satisfaction. A thin, cold curve at the corner of my mouth that I hadn't put there and couldn't take back. I just slaughtered 20 creatures, and my face was enjoying it. My parents gave me this. The killing intent factor, buried deep, forged in a childhood where violence was the only language spoken in our house. I'd spent my whole life suppressing it, being quiet, being gentle, being the person my uncle and aunt deserved to raise. But down here, in the dark, with nothing but monsters and bones for company, I couldn't afford to suppress it anymore. The darkness inside me was the thing keeping me alive. I accepted that. I had to. Level 1229, skills at level 2, MP pool over 40,000. I'd been in the dungeon long enough that I'd lost track of time. Maybe 2 days, maybe more. The bag's gem had cycled through several recharges. I'd killed everything the ruins had thrown at me. It was time to find a way out. The upper ruins were different. Ancient buildings covered in vines, doors that required gem-powered magic to open. I found rooms with stone furniture, a chair, a table, things built by hands that understood civilization. I sat in that chair and nearly cried, not from sadness, from the simple, stupid comfort of sitting on something that wasn't rock. Then I found the hidden room, a door sealed by a gem that needed 5,000 MP to activate. At level 1, that would have been impossible. At level 1229, it was pocket change. The door ground open. Inside, a small chamber, untouched by time. A skeleton sat against the far wall, robed, ribs broken, dead a long time. Another discarded person who'd fought their way this far and stopped. "You made it here too," I said quietly. Must have been hell. I searched the room. The skeleton had left things behind, deliberately, carefully, arranged for whoever came next. A parchment, old and faded. I unrolled it and read, "My name is Angren Baslard. People call me the Great Sage Angren, but some might know me by another name, the Dark Hero." The words landed like a punch. I remembered. During the crystal measurement, when Antamahiro's crystal had turned black with smoke, the goddess had compared it to someone, the strongest man in history, the Dark Hero. He'd been here, in this room, sent to the same dungeon by the same goddess, disposed of the same way I'd been disposed of. The Great Sage, the most powerful figure in this world's history, was a skeleton in a hidden chamber because Goddess Visis had found him inconvenient. I wasn't the first person she'd thrown away. There was a lineage of the discarded, a history of people the goddess wanted erased. The parchment continued. He'd left everything he had for whoever came next. The Forbidden Arts Encyclopedia, a thick book filled with alchemical recipes I could only half understand. 3 scrolls in a language I couldn't read at all. A separate note labeled Forbidden Curse Scroll, and in the margins of the encyclopedia, written in blood that had dried to brown, "Beware of soul eaters." Were we all done in by that? I took the black robe off the skeleton's shoulders and put it on. It was warmer than the cloak I'd been wearing, darker, better suited for the permanent night of this dungeon. I draped my old cloak over the skeleton's shoulders in return. "I'll use all of it," I told him. "Everything you left." The Dark Hero had died here, the strongest man in history, and the goddess had still won. But he'd left his knowledge behind. The forbidden arts, the curse scrolls, the warning, a deliberate inheritance, his last act of defiance. She'd been doing this for generations, summoning heroes, measuring them, throwing away the ones who didn't fit her plans, and the ones who were too strong, too dangerous, too inconvenient. She threw them away too. Different reason, same dungeon, same death. The rage that had been burning in my chest since the teleportation circle went white. It got colder, harder, sharper. The Dark Hero's path was my path now, but I was going to finish what he couldn't. The Soul Eater was waiting at the top of the ruins. I found it embedded in a wall at the end of a man-made corridor, a giant stone face with a golden gem on its forehead. 4 sets of human bones littered the floor in front of it. The Dark Hero, the people who'd come before him, all stopped here. I tried to use Paralyze from a distance. A beam of light fired from the gem and clipped my finger before the word was halfway out of my mouth. Instantaneous. The thing could read intentions. The moment I formed the thought to attack, it had already fired. I retreated, bandaged the wound, thought, the dark hero, the strongest man alive, couldn't beat this thing. But the dark hero was strong. He fought with power. I fought with something different. The stone face began to move. Tentacles emerged from the wall, tipped with yellow light. More beam emitters. Sludge dropped from above and formed into shapes. Human shapes, 3 of them, with faces frozen in despair, mouths open in silent screams. Recreations of the dead, people the Soul Eater had collected and could reproduce to torment whoever came next. The zombies shuffled toward me. Behind them, the Soul Eater's stone face cracked into a grin. It was enjoying this. More sludge fell. 20 more zombies formed. They surrounded me. The Soul Eater displayed the spirits it had trapped, pale, translucent figures screaming from inside its body, black eye sockets, mouths stretched in agony. The souls of every hero who'd ever died in this dungeon, imprisoned and suffering, paraded as a weapon. I let my face crack, not the real crack, the performance, the act I'd been rehearsing my entire life. My eyes went wide. My breathing turned ragged. I stumbled backward, pressing against the wall like a cornered animal. My voice came out shaking. "You're using their faces? They were people." The Soul Eater's grin widened. "I'm still human," I whispered. I can't do this." I sank to my knees. My left arm was raised, trembling. My right hand covered my face. I looked like a man breaking. I looked like every hero who'd come before me, cornered, horrified, psychologically destroyed by the cruelty of what this thing could do. The Soul Eater stopped firing. Its tentacles relaxed. It leaned forward from the wall, savoring the moment. Why wouldn't it? This was its purpose. It ate souls, and fear was the seasoning. Here's what it didn't know about me. My parents taught me to cry on command by the time I was 6, to look terrified when I wasn't, to perform whatever emotion would make the beating stop faster. My uncle and aunt taught me kindness, but my parents taught me how to lie with my entire body. I was not breaking. I was not afraid. My left arm had been raised since I paralyzed the first 3 zombies, and I had never lowered it. "Paralyze," I said. The Soul Eater froze. The yellow gauge appeared above its head. Its stone face locked mid-grin. The tentacles went rigid. The zombies crumpled to the ground, puppets without a puppeteer. I stood up, brushed the dust off my knees. "You read surface emotions," I said, walking toward it. "You're good at it. Most things that walk in here, you can break before they ever get close. But I've been faking my emotions since before I could write my own name. Your read on me was perfect, and every single piece of it was wrong. Poison." The Soul Eater's face turned purple. Foam erupted from its mouth. Its body convulsed, spraying blue liquid across the walls. Sleep. The blue gauge layered on top of the yellow. Complete system shutdown. Motor function locked. Consciousness disabled. Poison eating through its vitals. I sat down in front of it and watched it die. It took a while. The stone cracked. The flesh underneath was softer than it looked. The trapped spirits writhed inside it as the poison spread, and for a moment, I worried I was hurting them too. Then the Soul Eater shuddered, went still, and died. Level 1229 to 1789. 560 levels from a single boss. My skills ticked up. Paralyze and Poison both hit level 3. The Soul Eater's corpse began to glow. Light poured out of it. Not the harsh beam light from before. Something softer, warmer, like snow catching sunlight. Shapes emerged from the glow. Translucent figures, floating upward, drifting through the cavern in a slow spiral. The trapped souls finally released. They spoke to me. The first was a half skull, the skeleton I'd found at the teleportation point, the very first bones I'd seen in this dungeon. His voice was tired and warm. He told me I was the first to notice him. He said he'd watched me dodge the Minotaur that night, and he'd been rooting for me since. "You really did great," he said. "I mean it." The second was the person whose axe I'd used against the bird head, the one that shattered. He apologized for the bad weapon. He said watching me survive where he couldn't had made him happier than anything. The person whose cloak I'd worn, the person whose dagger I'd carried, the skeleton floating in the swamp who'd watched me kill the dragon zombie. One by one, they appeared, and one by one, they told me what I'd done. Not the kills, not the levels, the small things, the things nobody should have noticed. A gentle-faced woman said the lizardmen had mocked her death for years. She said watching me destroy them had been the first peace she'd felt since she died. A man beside her agreed. He wished me luck. He called me son. 2 spirits, holding hands the same way their skeletons had been when I found them in the ruins. They told me to use their gems and coins on the surface. They told me to keep going. I couldn't speak. My throat was closed. My eyes were burning. I was standing in a cavern full of ghosts who should have hated me for surviving where they didn't, and instead, every single one of them was saying thank you. The entire time I'd been in this dungeon, they'd been watching from inside the Soul Eater. They'd seen me pay respects at their bones, fight the monsters that desecrated their remains, place their skulls in the cave wall when nobody was around to witness it. They noticed the small things, and they came back to tell me. The last to appear was the great sage himself, Angren Baslard, the Dark Hero. He stood among 4 other spirits, and his form was the most faded, barely visible. He looked at me. He didn't speak much. His voice reached me in fragments, broken, scattered like light through cracked glass. "Thank you," he said. And then, quieter, almost too faint to hear. "Please, that goddess." "I know," I said. "I will." The spirits dissolved, one by one, like snow falling upward. They broke apart into light and faded into the ceiling of the cavern. Then, it was just me again, alone, but not the same kind of alone as before. The golden stone from the Soul Eater's forehead sat in the rubble. I picked it up, warm. I carried it to the door at the top of the stairs, the one the Dark Hero had never reached, and pressed it into the indent on its surface. The door opened. Light hit me. Not torchlight, not magic. Sunlight. Real, warm, blinding sunlight, pouring through the gap like water through a broken dam. I stood there with my eyes closed and felt it on my face, on my hands, my arms, my neck. And for one long, suspended moment, I couldn't remember what sound I was supposed to make. I walked through the door and into the open air. The sky was blue. The wind was warm. Grass grew at the edge of the ruins, impossibly green after all that gray stone. I stood in the sunlight and breathed, and the air tasted like earth and growing things and the world above ground. Level 1789, 3 skills at level 3. A bag of forbidden knowledge from the strongest man who ever lived. A leather bag that produced food from another world, and a vendetta validated by every ghost in the dungeon beneath my feet. The goddess thought she'd thrown me away. She thought I'd rot in the dark with all the others she'd discarded. She was wrong about me. She was wrong about all of us. I tilted my face toward the sun and closed my eyes. The sunlight lasted about 10 minutes before the paranoia set in. I'd emerged from the disposal ruins at level 1789, wearing a dead man's robe and carrying a bag full of forbidden knowledge. The door had sealed behind me. Somewhere, an inspection team would eventually check that entrance, find the crystal hadn't changed color, and either investigate or shrug it off. I couldn't afford to bet on the shrug. The forest around the ruins was dense and old. I found a path, beaten earth, boot prints, the kind of trail a team uses regularly, and stayed 30 feet to the side of it, stepping on roots and rock to avoid leaving tracks. My status screen confirmed what the dungeon had given me: paralysis and poison at level 3, voluntary cancellation, non-lethal settings, sleep at level 3, MP pool over 59,000. The numbers were absurd, but numbers didn't matter if the goddess found out I was breathing. I needed civilization, a town where I could wash, eat something that wasn't conjured from a leather bag, learn the currency, and find someone who could read the ancient script on the Dark Hero's curse scrolls. My revenge was a marathon, not a sprint. Step 1 was disappearing into the world she thought had swallowed me. That's when I heard the squeaking. 6 slimes sat in a clearing ahead, blue, translucent, about the size of soccer balls. 5 of them had cornered the 6th against a moss-covered rock. The small one was half their size, trembling, its surface rippling with panic. The 5 pressed in, bouncing against it, slamming it into the stone. The sound it made was high and thin, desperate. My body moved before my brain caught up. Same reflex as the bus, same pattern, the strong crushing the weak while everyone else watched or joined in. My parents had taught me what that looked like. The goddess had perfected the lesson. "Paralyze," I said. All 6 froze. I walked into the clearing, switched poison to non-lethal, and hit the 5 bullies with just enough to make them sick. Then, I released one, the biggest, and watched it scramble away, trailing purple wisps. The other 4 followed the moment I freed them, bouncing over each other in a panicked retreat. The small one stayed frozen. I crouched in front of it and released the paralysis. "You fought back," I said. "That took guts." Its surface shifted from gray to a pale, uncertain blue. It quivered once, then sat still, watching me with whatever slimes use for eyes. I turned and walked away. 10 minutes later, I felt something soft bump against my ankle. The small slime had followed me, leaving a faint trail through the grass. I stopped. It stopped. I walked. It followed. I sat under a tree, pulled out the leather bag, and fed it some MP. The gem cycled, and out came a piece of katsu, breaded, golden, still warm. I tore off a corner and set it on the ground. The slime engulfed it instantly. Its body flushed pink, bright, unmistakable pink, the color of pure, stupid joy. Something cracked inside my chest. Not the cold crack from the dungeon, a warmer one. "All right," I said. "You need a name." The slime made a sound, a high, squeaky noise that came out like Piggy. "Pijimaru," I said. "Starting today, that's your name." Green. The slime turned green. Affirmative. Yes. I opened the Forbidden Arts Encyclopedia to the section on monster enhancement. The Dark Hero had developed potions that could strengthen monsters without the leveling system summoned heroes used. The ingredients were specific, rare materials from dungeons across the continent. One entry caught my eye: Skeleton King Bone Powder, effective on slimes. Second experiment: habitat listed as Mill's Ruins, deep layer. I filed that away. Pigimaru could become more than a companion. The Dark Hero's research was a roadmap. "Here's the situation," I told Pigimaru. "The goddess who runs this world threw me into a dungeon to die. I survived. Now I'm going to tear down everything she built. It's selfish, it's personal, and it's probably going to get dangerous." Pigimaru turned green again. "You sure?" Pink. Bright. Blazing pink. I showed Pigimaru how to wrap around my torso under the robe, a living layer of concealment, invisible to anyone who didn't pat me down. If discovered, he'd harden into a crystal ball shape, and I'd claim to be a fortune teller. We practiced it twice before setting off. We walked for half a day before I sensed them. 4 men on the path ahead, armed. The killing intent rolling off them was thick and specific. Hunters, not bandits. I didn't recognize them, but they had the look of professionals. One carried a curved sword he kept touching like a new toy. The one with the scar saw me first. He looked me up and down. Dirty robe, no visible weapons. A kid who'd obviously been sleeping in the woods. He dismissed me in 3 seconds. The curved sword one didn't. He stepped forward, mentioned he hadn't tested his new blade on a living person yet, and grinned like that was a charming thing to say. I feigned panic, backed away, stammered, let my hands shake. My father taught me this: how to look small, how to look broken, how to make the person with power believe they'd already won. "Paralyze," I said when they were all in range. 4 frozen statues. I poisoned them without blinking. While they died, I searched their belongings. Only coins, gold, silver, copper. Weapons and clothes could be traced. Coins couldn't. No experience from killing humans. Good to confirm. The presence I'd been ignoring since the clearing hit me full force. Someone else was in this forest. Someone fast, someone powerful, and someone whose killing intent had an impurity mixed into it. Not the clean aggression of a predator, but something complicated. Fear layered under fury. I found her the way you find a wildfire, by following the heat. She moved through the trees like a ghost. Slim build, white armor traced with blue and green lines, lemon yellow hair tied back under a cloak. The moment I threw a branch to test her position, she blurred sideways faster than anything human should move. Pigimaru confirmed from my back. She'd shifted 12 feet in under a second. "Paralyze," I said from the shadows. She froze mid-stride. I walked out, kept my distance, and released everything except her mouth. "I'm lost," I said. "If you know this area, I need directions to the nearest town." She stared at me, or tried to, her eyes locked forward by the paralysis. She asked about the 4 men. "Killed them," I said. The silence stretched. She asked if I'd done it alone. I told her I had help. A lie, but useful. People who think you have backup are less likely to try something when the paralysis wears off. Her name didn't matter yet. Mine didn't either. What mattered was what she told me. We were in the Ulza Kingdom, in the southern stretch of the dark-colored forest. The nearest city was Mills. Bread cost 1 copper coin, 30 coppers to a silver. And when I showed her the ancient script on the Forbidden Curse scroll, she couldn't read it, but she knew someone who might. A woman called the Forbidden Witch, exiled to the dangerous interior of the continent. I filed that away too. The Forbidden Witch, another person the goddess had discarded. Before I left, I asked one more thing. She answered carefully, watching my face for something she couldn't find. Dark circles sat heavy under her eyes. She looked like someone who hadn't slept properly in weeks, someone running. I told her I didn't dislike people like her. The paralysis was wearing off, so I left. At a stream nearby, I washed my face, filled the empty cola bottle with water, and cleaned the worst of the dungeon grime from my hands. Pigimaru emerged from my robe, and his color was wrong, a flat, grayish blue. Depression. He felt guilty. The woman had appeared in the forest without him detecting her. Some guardian he was. He couldn't even watch my back. I picked him up. She had spirit-enhanced stealth, I said. The 4 professionals I killed couldn't track her either. You not sensing her isn't failure. It's normal. Green. Faint, but green. We're partners, I said. That means I cover what you can't. You cover what I can't. Deal? Pink. Slowly, then brighter. The city of Mills had walls, gates, and 2 guards who looked bored enough to let a dead man through if he told a good enough joke. The female guard stopped me. She hadn't seen my face before. No weapons. Was I a mercenary? I became someone else. Shoulders rounded, voice pitched higher, eyes a little too wide. a country kid who'd heard there was work in town, something about ruins and a recruitment drive. I scratched the back of my head and asked if this was the right place. The male guard told me the Marcus was accepting mercenaries and waved me through. Inside, I checked 3 inns. Chose the middle one, cheap enough to be invisible, clean enough to sleep. I bribed the innkeeper with a silver coin, gave my name as Hadi Skull, and briefed Pigamaru on the crystal ball contingency. He practiced hardening his surface twice, then curled up under the bed and vibrated contentedly. The tavern that night was a gold mine. Mercenaries gathered in clusters, drinking, talking, leaking information the way drunk people always do. A new layer had been discovered in the mill's ruins, and the local lord was paying for exploration. A bounty existed on a high elf princess knight from the Nea Holy Kingdom, beautiful, dangerous, vanished, and in the north, the Great Oath Wall had fallen to the Great Demon Emperor's forces. The invasion had halted after the breach, but the continent was nervous. I'd later learn that while I was eavesdropping on mercenaries, Ayaka was still at level 1 in the goddess's training forest, unable to deliver a killing blow, having her subdued monsters stolen by Kirihara and mocked by Koyamada. She'd made a deal with the goddess to protect the weaker classmates. She was carrying guilt about my death, like a stone around her neck, but I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was the world outside the dungeon was bigger, messier, and more fractured than the goddess wanted anyone to realize. Back in my room, I pulled out the Forbidden Arts Encyclopedia and found what had been nagging me since the tavern. Mill's ruins, deep layer, skeleton king, habitat confirmed, bone powder ingredient for the monster enhancement potion. Pigamaru was asleep on the pillow. I watched him breathe, if slimes breathe, and something settled in my chest. The dungeon had given me power. This city would give me resources, and Pigamaru had given me something I hadn't expected to find in another world, a reason to be careful with my life. The recruitment meeting was the next morning in a square on the edge of town. 50-odd mercenaries, a stage, and a portly nobleman named Creed Harkley, who announced the quest with the enthusiasm of a man spending his inheritance on a hobby. 300 gold coins for a treasure called the Dragon's Eye Cup. Everything else found in the ruins could be sold back at fair prices. Skeleton King materials were fair game. I was about to register when a commotion broke out. A tall, thin man named Monk Drogetti grabbed a cloaked woman and accused her of being the fugitive Seras Ashrain. He pulled back her hood, reaching for pointed ears that would prove she was an elf. Human ears. Round, ordinary, unmistakably human. The woman stood perfectly still, let the crowd see, and introduced herself as Mist Balukas, traveling to the Yonat Duchy, here for the recruitment, nothing more. I recognized her voice instantly. The forest, the paralysis, the dark circles under her eyes. She'd changed her ears. Spirit magic, I assumed. The same power she'd used for armor and speed. A disguise that cost her something, probably sleep, which explained why she looked perpetually exhausted. Drogetti retreated, humiliated and furious. The crowd lost interest. I registered under Hadi Skull, then caught up to Mist on the road back to town. "You're here for Mills too," I said. She turned. Recognition crossed her face, quickly buried. "I need someone who knows local prices," I said. "Shopping alone, I'll get gouged. I'll pay for your time." She studied me for a long moment. Then she held out her hand. Her palm was smooth, not a calloused warrior's hand, but something softer. The hand of someone who fought with magic, not steel. "Miss Balukas," she said. "Hadi Skull," I said. "It's a pseudonym." "I know," she said. "Mine too." We shook on it. 2 fugitives, 2 fake names, and a dungeon full of skeletons waiting for us underground. It wasn't trust, not yet, but it was a start. The mill's ruins were a joke compared to the disposal ruins. Where that dungeon had tried to kill me every 10 steps, this one felt like walking through a museum after hours. Gold-eyed monsters with black skin, killing intent, diluted, watered-down versions of the things that had nearly ended me underground. I moved through the upper layers in silence. Paralyze, poison, move on. Bodies dropped without a sound. I hid them in alcoves before other mercenaries could notice. Pigamaru tapped my ribs from under the robe whenever something approached from behind. Green flash for clear, quick tap for incoming. By the 14th layer, I'd left a trail of dead monsters with no visible wounds. The Sword Tiger Corps, the fastest team in the ruins, turned back, muttering about poison fog and ancient curses. I let them go. Fewer people down here meant fewer questions. That's when I heard Monk Drogetti. He was talking to 2 mercenaries, a bald one with an axe and a bearded one with dead eyes. They were discussing Mist. The word kill came first, then capture, then something about what they'd do to her body before they sold her to a brothel. The bald one was grinning while he described it. My body went cold in a way I recognized. Not fear, the other thing. The thing my parents put inside me before I was old enough to understand what it was. I stepped out of the shadows. "Paralyze!" I said. 3 frozen statues. I poisoned all 3. Somewhere deeper in the corridor, monsters were already approaching, drawn by the noise. Dying in the ruins is normal, I said. Your words, not mine. Left them there. No regret. Some people exist only as a warning to others. Past the 15th layer, the map went blank. Wider corridors, more luminous stones, stronger monsters in packs. I paralyzed and poisoned them in sets, mapping as I went. On the 17th layer, I found living quarters with jewelry and gems. Took what I could carry. The dragon's eye cup sat on an altar behind a stone door. A dragon statue stood beside it, eyes too detailed for decoration. Paralyze, I said, before it moved. A dragon-human monster erupted from inside the statue, but every muscle was already locked. It strained against the paralysis until its own head tore free. It died thrashing. The cup was silver with a purple tint. Dragon-eye gems set into the stem. 300 gold coins. I picked it up and felt nothing. This wasn't why I'd come. Footsteps behind me. Miss Beluga stepped into the room. She looked at the cup in my hand, then at the dead monster, and her expression did something complicated. Disappointment, folding into respect, folding into exhaustion. She asked what I wanted for the cup. Take it, I said. What? The cup. It's yours. I don't need it. She tried to offer her sword, tried to offer services, luggage, cooking, guard duty. Her voice cracked, and I realized she'd been counting on this reward. 300 gold coins was survival money for someone on the run. My goal isn't the cup, I said. There's a monster deeper in these ruins, the Skeleton King. It has something I need. She couldn't categorize me. A man who cleared 17 layers, killed a trap guardian, retrieved the prize, and gave it away for free. Good. Unpredictable people are harder to betray. Be my guard for the descent, I said. After we're done, we'll talk. She agreed before I finished the sentence. The Forbidden Arts Encyclopedia described a hidden mechanism in the altar. I found the protrusion, pressed it, turned left. The altar split open, and a staircase descended into darkness. The lower layer was different. More luminous stones, wider corridors, a hum in the air. A monster rounded the corner, flower bud head, 3 gold eyes, tentacles whipping forward. Mist stepped in front of me. One cut severed the tentacles. A second bisected it crown to hip. Clean, precise. The swordsmanship of formal training, not mercenary brawling. Impressive, I said, and meant it. She explained what I'd been wondering. Gold-eyed monsters carried more experience due to the evil king element. Heroes hunted them to extinction above ground, so survivors fled underground. Monsters running from heroes. Heroes running from the goddess. Everyone running from something. We found a restroom. The deeper we went, the more Mist's exhaustion showed. Dark circles like bruises. Movements half a beat slower. She refused to rest until I insisted. She lay down, still armored, still tense. I waited, her eyes closed. Then, I told Pigmeru to nuzzle against her. While she was distracted, I cast sleep. The blue gauge appeared. Her body relaxed, and within seconds, her magic began to unravel. The headband vanished. The shimmer around her face dissolved. Her ears, round, human, ordinary, stretched and sharpened into long, elegant points. High elf. Her face had changed. The beauty that had been notable before became something else. Ethereal, sharp-featured, the kind of face that belonged on a cathedral window. Lemon yellow hair catching the glow of luminous stones. Saris Ashrain, former captain of the Ni Holy Kingdom's Saint Knight Order, the most wanted fugitive on the continent, sleeping on a bedroll because I drugged her. The moral calculus was simple. I needed to know who I was traveling with. But there was another calculation underneath. She was exhausted because her spirit magic consumed her ability to sleep. Every hour maintaining that disguise was an hour of rest she couldn't take. The dark circles weren't just fatigue. They were the price of staying alive. 15 years of my life had looked exactly like that. Never safe enough to close your eyes. The smart play was obvious. Wake her up. Confront her. Use what I knew as leverage. The most wanted fugitive on the continent, paralyzed by sleep, her secret in my hands. Instead, I pulled a blanket over her shoulders and sat against the wall. Before she woke, I put myself to sleep. She found me on my sleeping bag, didn't question why she'd slept so deeply for the first time in weeks. I pretended to wake naturally, and we moved deeper. The Skeleton King came through the far wall like the stone was paper, 15 feet tall, a crown of fused bone atop a skull incorporating pieces of other creatures. Orange eyes that settled on Mist as the bigger threat. She identified it instantly, spotted a silver weakness beneath its jaw, and offered to use her hidden power, ice weapon, spirit armor. She asked me to keep it secret. I will, I said, but you won't need it. The Skeleton King opened its jaw. Light gathered for an energy attack. Paralyze. 15 feet of bone froze mid-charge. The light guttered and died. Poison. Purple spread from the skull downward. Cracks formed along its ribs. Mist stared at me, the anomaly that emptied the upper ruins, the deaths without wounds, the pale-skinned bodies. It all clicked behind her eyes. My abilities are a bit abnormal, I said. Keep this secret, I'll do the same for you. She nodded. The Skeleton King collapsed with a sound like a cathedral folding in on itself. Bone fragments scattered across the floor. I moved through the debris with the small hammer from my pack and chipped silver bone powder from the remains, the ingredient I'd come for, the whole reason I'd entered Mills. Pijimaru pulled at my sleeve, pointing at the shattered skull. Inside, wrapped in cloth that glowed with an ancient crest, sat an egg, smooth, hard, colored in a gradient, red, black, white, warm to the touch. Pijimaru went pink, bright, unmistakable, almost violent. He pressed against the egg and made sounds I'd never heard, high, insistent, pleading. You want this? Green, intense green. I didn't know what was inside, but Pigimaru had never asked me for anything before. It's yours, I said. He didn't change back from pink for 10 minutes. I'd later learned that while I was pulling eggs from a skeleton's skull, Ayaka was in the bone ruins near the capital. The goddess had forced her to train lower-ranked students under threat of disposal, level 5, carrying guilt about my death, surrounded by classmates who mocked her or used her. Ground down the same way the goddess ground down everyone who resisted. But I didn't know that yet. All I knew was that I had bone powder, a mysterious egg, and a partner whose real name I hadn't earned the right to use. That was about to change. We separated before the surface. Mist walked out with the Dragon's Eye cup. The commotion was the perfect distraction. The checkpoint officer waved me through while every eye followed the woman with the 300 gold coin prize. Back in Mills, I sold the deeper layer gems, received a bonus from the marquee, and bought a world map. 6 countries. The gold-dwelling demon swarm zone in the center, home to the Forbidden Witch, who could read the Dark Hero's curse scrolls. In my room, I prepared the enhancement potion. Bone powder, heated, filtered through the Dark Hero's process. Pigimaru flattened into a bowl shape. I poured. His body lit up, warm glow pulsing 3 times, then settling into his core. Perfect absorption. The egg sat on the desk beside him, warm and still. Mist arrived at 8. I laid it out. The demon swarm zone, the Forbidden Witch, the need for a guard. She considered routes. The Mira Empire blocked the south. The north skirted demon territory. The demon zone was the only way through. I can handle demons, I said. What I can't handle is watching my own back 24 hours a day. She hesitated, not about the danger, about something else. By the way, I said, one thing, Saras. She froze. Her hand went to her mouth. Blue eyes, wide, terrified, locked onto mine. How long have you known? Since the ruins. Your disguise dropped when you slept. The spirit magic requires consciousness. The color drained from her face. Then it came back, along with something unexpected. Relief. You saw, she said, and you said nothing. I said nothing. Why? Because I needed a guard, not a hostage, and because someone who can bisect a gold-eyed monster in 2 strikes doesn't deserve to be blackmailed. She was quiet for a long time. Then she released the spirit magic. It happened like fog burning off. Her ears lengthened into tapered points. Her features sharpened into something the word beautiful couldn't quite reach. Saras Ashrain, she said, former captain of the Ni Holy Kingdom Saint Knights. My spirit contracts require sleep as payment. Every hour of disguise costs me rest I can never recover. She looked at me, fear and trust and exhaustion woven together. Your turn, she said. Fair. Toka Mimori, not from this world. The goddess summoned me, ranked me, threw me into a dungeon to die. I survived. Now I need the Forbidden Witch to read scrolls the last person she disposed of left behind. You're a summoned hero, she said. Was. Now I'm just someone with a grudge and a leather bag. She almost smiled. Almost. The exhaustion in her eyes shifted into something warmer. Recognition, maybe. 2 people discarded by the same system, sitting in a cheap inn room, trading the truths that could destroy them. I placed a blue dragon stone in her palm. Prismatic light, scattering rainbows across the walls when I pushed mana into it. She nearly dropped it. She told me it was worth several times the Dragon's Eye Cup reward. Disaster class material. Collectors would empty their vaults. Payment for the escort, I said. She tried to refuse. I told her a guard who can't afford supplies is a dead guard. Haughty in public, she said. Toka in private. Mist in public. Saras in private. Agreed. We shook hands. Her palm was smooth, the same as the first time. The hand of someone who fought with spirits, not steel. But this handshake meant something different. The first had been 2 strangers agreeing to a transaction. This one was 2 fugitives trusting each other with the things that could get them killed. Pigimaru turned pink and made a sound like a tiny bell. Saras looked down at him and laughed. First time I'd heard it. He approves, I said. I'm honored, she said, and meant it. After she left, ears rounded, disguise restored, I sat on the bed and looked at the egg. Pigamaru was curled around it, glowing from the enhancement potion, his color a steady, contented green. Bone powder secured, potion working, a partner who knew my name, a destination that might unlock the Dark Hero's curse scrolls. For the first time since the disposal ruins, I wasn't just surviving, I was building something. The egg pulsed once, warm, faint, like a heartbeat, and went still. Saris didn't come back. 1 o'clock passed, then 2, then 3. I sat on the bench outside the inn, watching the street, and the bench felt colder with every minute. She'd gone to collect the Dragon's Eye Cup reward from the market. Simple errand. Should have taken an hour, maybe 2, if the paperwork was as bloated as everything else in this feudal system. By 3:15, the excuse-making part of my brain had run out of material. Pigamaru was gray under my robe. Depression, gray. He'd grown attached to her. The woman who'd laughed at his handshake. The first genuine laugh either of us had heard since arriving in this world. His body pressed against my ribs, trembling faintly, and I told myself I was going to the square to buy a map. Just a map, not because I was worried. The square told me everything. A crowd had gathered, mercenaries, soldiers, townspeople, all talking over each other with the particular urgency of people who smell bounty money. I caught fragments. The woman who found the Dragon's Eye Cup. Her disguise broke at the Marquise's mansion. An illusion-breaking magician had been present, one of the rare specialists on the continent. And when the spell shattered, Saris's disguise went with it. Pointed ears, lemon yellow hair, the former captain of the Ni Holy Kingdom's Saint Knights, standing in a nobleman's parlor with her identity written on her face. She'd fled to the dark forest. Half the square wanted to chase her for the bounty. Then the sky went dark. Black dragons, 4 of them, cut across the sunset in formation, ridden by figures in black armor. The cries they made weren't animal sounds. They were declarations. The crowd fell silent instantly. A soldier who'd been boasting about claiming the bounty went white and backed into a wall. The Black Dragon Knights, the strongest knight order on the continent, and they were heading for the forest. I was already running. The forest was a maze of shadows and filtered light. I tracked the direction the dragons had flown and moved fast, cutting through underbrush, listening for sounds of combat. Pigamaru pressed tight against my torso, his color shifting green-red-green in rapid succession, agitated, scanning, afraid. I found her underneath a knight in black armor, Gizon. He'd introduced himself to her with the enthusiasm of a man who enjoyed his work, deputy leader of a unit under one of the 5 dragon warriors. He'd cornered Saris after she'd fought through several knights and a wyvern. Her sword was gone. Her spirit armor wouldn't activate. The illusion breaker's disruption had scrambled her light spirits, and without all 3 contracts working, the full armor was impossible. He had her pinned. He was describing what he planned to do before he killed her. The words were the kind that don't need repeating, the kind my father used to say to my mother when he thought no one was listening. I stepped out of the trees. The meeting time passed a while ago, I said. Paralyze. Gizon froze mid-sentence. The black dragon beside him locked up half a second later. I hit the dragon with lethal poison and Gizon with non-lethal. I had questions first, then sleep, layered on top, because a paralyzed man with functioning ears is still a witness. Saris was on her feet before I reached her. Her disguise was gone. Pointed ears, sharpened features, the ethereal high elf form I'd seen in the ruins when I put her to sleep. Dark circles carved deep under her eyes. She looked like she hadn't slept since the last time I'd drugged her, and she probably hadn't. She thanked me. Then she tried to cancel our contract. She held out the blue dragonstone I'd given her the night before and told me to take it back. Being near her was dangerous. The Black Dragon Knights would kill anyone associated with her. She'd lied about her plans. She hadn't intended to travel to the Forbidden Witch. She'd been saving for a ship to the western continent, running to the only place the goddess's influence couldn't easily reach. "Take the stone," she said. "Please, you've done more than enough." I gave her the women's clothes I'd bought that morning. A precaution. I'd picked them up before breakfast, just in case. The kind of paranoia that keeps you alive. "Change," I said. "The knights saw your armor, not civilian clothes." "Toka, the contract stands. Finding another guard as good as you is more trouble than it's worth." She stared at me. Her wind spirit was active, the one that sensed truth. She knew I wasn't lying, but she also knew I wasn't telling the whole truth. The contract wasn't about convenience. She resembled my aunt, the woman who'd pulled me out of my parents' house when I was 9, who'd shown me that kindness existed even in a world designed to crush it. Saris had that same quality, warmth wrapped in exhaustion, strength that cost her everything to maintain. I wasn't going to let another version of that person die in a forest. We interrogated Gizon, or tried to. I woke him, released his mouth, kept everything else locked. Saras knelt beside him and asked who had ordered her death. He laughed, Told her she'd make a lovely plaything for the Black Dragon Knights. Said the things men say when they believe violence is the only language worth speaking. A white spear fell from the sky and punched through his chest. The impact buried him 3 inches into the earth. No warning, no sound, just a shaft of white, perfectly thrown from an altitude no human arm should reach, and Gizan was dead with a look of surprise frozen on his face. I looked up. A white dragon descended through the canopy, larger than the black ones, scales like polished bone, eyes the color of blood. On its back sat a figure in white hair, white armor, red eyes that found mine before they found Ceres's, and stayed. 3 black dragons flanked him, each carrying a knight. They landed in the clearing with the casual precision of people who owned the air and tolerated the ground. The white-haired figure spoke. His name was Shibito Gartland. People called him humanity's strongest. He said it the way you'd state your height or your shoe size, not bragging, just identifying. The fear hit me like a wall of ice water. I'd felt killing intent before. The Soul Eater in the disposal ruins had radiated it. The Skeleton King had carried it like a crown. But this was different. This was a man who had hunted the strongest things alive and found them all disappointing. The boredom in his eyes was worse than rage. Rage you can redirect. Boredom just kills. 4 dragon warriors flanked him. Schweitz, the bearded one with an eye patch and a voice like a church organ. Oban, blonde, tanned, gold earrings, the kind of man who talked about money even during an execution. A bandaged knight whose single visible eye tracked everything. And the 4th, silent, watching. Ceres recognized them. She told me what I'd already guessed. The 5 dragon warriors, the strongest military unit on the continent. Shibito had killed Gizan himself, his own subordinate's deputy, because Gizan had been talking too much. Information control, the kind of ruthlessness that doesn't waste a single breath on justification. Schweitz filled in the rest. His voice carried the steady cadence of a man who delivered bad news professionally for decades. King Urutra of the Nea Holy Kingdom, the man Ceres had served, had ordered her assassination, not her capture, her death, in a pure state. Because if he couldn't possess her, no one would. Ceres's knees buckled. Her wind spirit confirmed every word, no lies. The king she devoted her life to protecting wanted her corpse delivered clean. But that wasn't the worst part. Schweitz kept going. The goddess Visus had wanted Ceres. Specifically, personally, when King Urutra refused to hand her over, the goddess used Bekuos as her weapon. The invasion of the Nea Holy Kingdom, the war that destroyed Ceres's homeland, scattered her order, killed her comrades, happened because the goddess wanted one person and a king said no. A war, an entire nation destroyed, thousands dead because of a goddess's shopping list. Ceres asked about Princess Cattleya. Her voice cracked on the name, and I filed that away. The crack, the way her composure fractured specifically on that word. Cattleya had been arranged to marry Shibito as part of the post-war political settlement. The princess Ceres had sworn to protect was now a bargaining chip in a marriage she hadn't chosen. Shibito dismissed Ceres like she was furniture. He turned to me instead. His red eyes locked onto mine, and he said something that reframed the entire conversation. He wasn't interested in Ceres. He was interested in me. He'd been watching since the moment he arrived. My posture, my breathing. The way I hadn't run, hadn't panicked, hadn't done any of the things a normal person does when 4 dragons land in their clearing. Schweitz thought I was cowering. Shibito knew better. He said I was looking for an opening, searching for a gap in his attention that didn't exist. He was right. He asked my name. I gave him the fake one, Hades score. He saw through it instantly. Didn't care. Names were irrelevant to a man who measured the world in one metric. Can you fight me? I asked him a question instead, whether he was satisfied, whether the title, Humanity's Strongest, came with an opponent worth having. He told me the truth. No. Political constraints kept him leashed. The Great Demon Emperor was off limits because nations needed the war managed, not won. The goddess's heroes were still too weak. He existed at the summit, and the summit was empty. That was when I made the calculation. A random mercenary had 0 value to Shibito Gartland. Killing me was housekeeping. Clean up the witness. Move on. But an otherworldly hero, a disposed summoned hero who'd survived the goddess's death sentence, that was a prospect. That was someone who might grow into the opponent he'd been starving for. My real name is Toka Mimori, I said. I'm an otherworldly hero. The goddess summoned me, ranked me, and threw me into a dungeon to die. I survived. Now I'm heading to the gold-dwelling demon swarm zone to get stronger. Silence. If you're looking for an enemy worth killing, I said, give me time. I'll come find you. Shibito's expression changed for the first time. Not surprise, recognition. The look of a man who'd just been told the meal he'd been waiting for was still cooking. Schweitz confirmed the details quietly. Otherworldly heroes, the goddess's summoning system, the disposal of those deemed useless. Shibito absorbed it all without blinking. Then he smiled, a real smile, the first genuine expression I'd seen on his face. He agreed. Spare us both. Let me grow. Come back when I was worth killing. Saras nearly collapsed with relief. Oban protested. Letting the Saint Knight escape meant losing Arutra's bounty. Shibito silenced him with a look that could have stopped a heartbeat. The dragon warriors prepared to leave. Dragons shifted, knights mounted. The clearing filled with the sound of leather and scale. Shibito turned his back to me and walked toward his white dragon, his back turned, wide open. The negotiation had worked. The gamble had paid off. I talked my way out of certain death, using nothing but the truth and a promise I could grow into something he wanted to kill. Saras was safe. I was alive. The smart thing, the grateful thing, was to let them fly away and count my blessings. But Shibito knew my name. He knew I was a disposed hero. He knew Saras was alive and traveling with me. The moment he reported back, every intelligence network on the continent would have that information within weeks. The goddess would learn I'd survived. The hunt would begin in earnest. Every advantage I'd built, the anonymity, the fake identity, the 6-month grace period before the inspection team checked the disposal ruins, all of it would evaporate the second these 5 people reached civilization. I'd told Shibito I would come find him. I lied. Paralyze. 5 dragon warriors dropped like marionettes with cut strings. Dragons seized mid-step. Shibito hit the ground face first, and the impact sounded like a tree falling. His white dragon crashed beside him, one wing pinned at an impossible angle. Saras screamed my name. Poison, I said. Lethal. Purple spread through all 5. The dragons, too. I watched their bodies arch against the paralysis as the poison found their blood, and I felt nothing. Not triumph, not guilt. The cold, clean nothing that lives in the space between a decision and its consequences. Shibito forced himself upright, through the paralysis. His muscles tore against the lock. I could hear the wet sound of fibers shredding, and he managed to rise to one knee, blood sheeting from the internal damage. Humanity's strongest wasn't a title. It was a diagnosis. His body was breaking itself apart to obey his will. He reached for a spear on his belt. Saras stepped between us, sword raised. Ready. I'm your guard, she said. The blue dragonstone covers this. The bandaged knight died first. His body had been forcing small movements against the paralysis, and the strain killed him faster than the poison. As he died, a light erupted from his body, a signal, bright as a flare, shooting straight into the darkening sky. Death signal, automatic. The kind of contingency an elite unit builds into its members. 20 seconds later, the sky filled with black shapes. 20 dragons, maybe more. Reinforcements summoned by a dead man's final act. Pigameru, I said. Combined form. He surged from under my robe and spread across my body. A living exoskeleton of slime that hardened at the joints and sprouted spike-like projections from my shoulders, arms, back. The spikes extended outward, 20 feet in every direction, thin as wire, and tipped with the capacity to channel my skills at range. The Dragon Knights were hovering in formation against the scarlet sky, waiting for orders. Confused, their leaders were on the ground, bleeding, and the man responsible was standing in a thicket of glowing spikes. I reached through the spikes. Paralyze. Sleep. The skills traveled the length of each projection and hit targets at 20 meters. Dragons locked up mid-wing beat. Knights froze in their saddles. They fell, all of them. A rain of black armor and scaled bodies crashing through the canopy into the forest floor. The sound was thunder and breaking wood, and the wet thud of heavy things landing wrong. Poison. Everything that hit the ground. The 5 knights who'd been on the ground, the ones I'd missed in the first volley, tried to rush me. Paralysis caught 3. Sleep took the 4th. The 5th got close enough for Saras to cut him down with a single stroke, her blade reinforced with ice spirits, the edge bright enough to leave after images. New skills unlocked mid-battle. Freeze. Dark. Berserk. The status screen flashed notifications I didn't have time to read. I tested Berserk on Oban, the blonde knight who'd talked about money while planning Saras's execution. The skill drove his paralyzed body into a frenzy of involuntary muscle contractions that tore him apart from the inside. Dark on Schweitz. Blindness. He described Saras as a potential reward for his subordinates. He died without seeing what killed him. My MP was draining fast. The combined form consumed a brutal amount per second. but I didn't need long. Poison was doing the real work. I just needed to keep everything paralyzed until the poison finished. Sleep leveled up to 3. The notification came between heartbeats. Release, I said. Pigameru. He retracted. The spikes dissolved. My body felt like I'd run a marathon in a sauna. MP was down to a sliver. The level up restored it to full just in time. The number jumping from 1789 to 1796. The forest was quiet. Black dragons lay scattered between the trees like fallen monuments. Knights in dark armor, motionless. Poison still working through the ones who hadn't died yet. The sunset had turned the sky the color of old blood, and the shadows stretching from the bodies looked like they were reaching for something. I walked to Shibito. He was still alive, still conscious. The paralysis held him flat on his back, but his red eyes tracked me as I approached. Blood leaked from his mouth, his nose, the corners of his eyes. The poison was everywhere, eating him from the inside, and his body was still trying to fight it, muscles twitching against the lock, refusing to stop. Humanity's strongest. He asked me what I was. The words came out broken, shattered consonants forced through a paralyzed jaw, barely human. But the intent was clear, not anger, curiosity. Even dying, he wanted to categorize me, file me in whatever taxonomy of threats he carried in his head. Sarah stood beside me, sword lowered, watching. I'm not a hero, I said. Shibito's eyes didn't close. They dimmed, like a fire going out one coal at a time. I'm not a warrior. The last twitch, the last breath. The red faded from his irises until they were just eyes, empty, staring at a sky they could no longer see. I'm an avenger. The forest held the silence like a cupped hand. Sarah spoke first. She'd been watching me, not the bodies, not the dragons, me. She asked about the goddess, about what I'd told Shibito, that I was a summoned hero, disposed of, thrown away. I told her, all of it, the classroom, the ranking, the goddess's smile when she sent me to die, the middle finger I'd given her as the teleportation circle swallowed me whole. Saras was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was different, not formal, not the contracted guard speaking to her employer, something rawer. The goddess destroyed my kingdom to acquire me, she said. She killed my comrades. She scattered my order. She turned the man I served into something that prays for my death. She knelt, not a servant's bow, a knight's pledge. One knee, sword across the other, head raised, eyes on mine. Your enemy is my enemy, she said. From this moment, I serve your cause, not as a guard under contract, as someone who chooses this. I looked at her, pointed ears, dark circles, the exhaustion of a woman who hadn't stopped running since the day her world ended. And underneath all of it, underneath the fatigue and the fear and the grief, something I recognized. Fury, quiet, patient, lethal fury, the same kind that lived in my chest. Then we move, I said. The forbidden witch, the demon zone, everything we need to destroy her starts there. Saras rose, understood. Behind us, the bodies were already drawing scavengers, small forest creatures, cautious, circling the edges of the clearing where humanity's strongest military unit lay dead. I'd later learn that a political summit would convene to investigate the destruction of the 5 dragon warriors, that a group called the Ashinto, a curse-wielding organization operating in the shadows, would be blamed for the attack, a convenient decoy. I hadn't planned it, but I wouldn't correct it either. I'd later learn that while I was watching Shibito die in a darkening forest, Ayaka was in the ancient dragon ruins near the capital. She'd taken 7 students the goddess had marked for disposal, the ones too weak, too scared, too human for the system, and she was leading them through monster-infested corridors because nobody else would. She'd encountered Tamahiro, the A-rank classmate who'd shown me fake sympathy before my disposal. His personality had curdled, powerful now, cruel, dismissing anyone below him as worthless. She'd seen Kirihara torture a golden-eyed monster for sport, cutting its limbs off one by one to lure others. And at the exit, a new figure waited. Nyantan Kikapado, the goddess's proxy, sent to oversee the heroes with violet hair and cat-like eyes, and a loyalty enforced by the simplest lover in the world, her sisters, held hostage. But I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was the forest smelled like blood and poison and dying autumn. Pigamaru was green against my chest, steady, calm, the color of someone who trusted the person carrying him. The egg pulsed warm in my pack, and Saras walked beside me, not behind me, her stride matching mine for the first time since we'd met. 2 fugitives, 1 destination, and a goddess who didn't know her dead man was coming for her. We planted the decoys before dawn, blood-stained cloth from Ceres's old armor, dragged through dirt to simulate a wounded fugitive, footprints toward the river, monster blood in the tracks. Wolves would find it. Investigators would find what the wolves left. If the world wanted Ceres Ashrain dead, I'd give them a trail, just not a body. 2 days north on back roads. Ceres wore her disguise, ears rounded, hair darkened, but the illusion magic was draining her. Every 6 hours, I used sleep to give her 3 hours of rest. It wasn't sustainable, but it kept her standing. The village appeared at sunset, a small settlement strung with lanterns for a harvest festival, bonfires, dancers, travelers everywhere. Perfect cover. Ceres collapsed at the inn. I walked the square alone and caught fragments of conversation. Chaos in Bakuos. The 5 dragon warriors dead. Nobody knew how. Good. A mask stall caught my eye. Rows of painted faces. Demons, heroes, beasts. One stood out, horns curving upward, compound eyes in black and gold, mandibles frozen in a permanent snarl. The Fly King, Belzegia, a demon lord who'd fortified an island and held it against invaders for 100 years. Defeated eventually, but remembered. Popular throughout the continent, the shopkeeper said. Everyone loves a good villain. I bought 2, the king and his subordinate. Back at the inn, I put on the Fly King mask and looked in the mirror. The face staring back wasn't Toka Mimori, wasn't Haughty Skull. It was a war face, an identity that could move across the continent, recruit fighters, wage a campaign, and never trace back to a disposed hero the goddess had forgotten. The Fly King's battle group. 2 members and a slime, for now. I'd later learned that a political summit had convened at the White Castle, 5 kingdoms debating who'd killed the 5 dragon warriors. The goddess sat among them, serene, untouchable. By the end, a report arrived. A curse-wielding group called the Ashinto had claimed responsibility. They hadn't done it, but they wanted the reputation, and no one could prove otherwise. I hadn't planned the cover, but I wasn't going to correct it. Monroy, Ulza's royal capital, sprawled under a blue sky with the ease of a city that had never been conquered. We passed through the gates without a single check. The decoys had worked, or Ulza simply didn't care. Either way, we were ghosts. We registered at an inn as mercenaries and spent the evening in a tavern, listening. The room buzzed with 2 topics: the 5 dragon warriors' destruction and the Ashinto cult that had claimed credit. Then the Ashinto walked in, purple robes, 6 of them. They declared themselves protectors of Muaji, child of the curse god, and demanded the best seats. The tavern went quiet the way rooms do, when everyone is afraid, but won't admit it. They'd claimed my kill. Duke Swan was reportedly recruiting them. The political machinery was folding them in. Perfect. The louder they were, the quieter I could be. At the next table, 2 men were talking about the Forbidden Witch, a dark elf living deep in the gold-dwelling demon swarm zone. One of them said something that made me set down my cup. A blood arena fighter named Eve Speed knew the witch's exact location. Not the general area that every rumor pointed to, the exact location. I needed that information. I bought the men drinks. They talked freely. Eve Speed, strongest gladiator in Monroy, undefeated for 3 years. A leopard-type beast woman, enslaved since childhood. She'd earned enough to buy her own freedom 2 years ago, but was still fighting, saving every coin for a child named Liz, a dark elf girl who wasn't her daughter, wasn't even her species, sold to slave traders in this city. 3 years of blood, and she'd spent 2 of them fighting for someone else's cage. Then Eve Speed walked into the tavern. Leopard features, spotted fur along her jawline, tufted ears, golden eyes that scanned the room with the automatic threat assessment of someone who fought for a living. Slender, but corded with muscle. A sword on her hip, worn like something she'd used 1,000 times. I approached her at the counter, introduced myself as Haiti, told her I'd heard she knew the Forbidden Witch's location. She said the rumors were based on a joke, said the demon zone would kill anyone who entered, returned the silver coin I'd offered, and left. She lied, Ceres said when I came back. Her wind spirit had been active, the one that detected truth. Every word about the witch was a lie. Eve knew exactly where the Forbidden Witch lived, and she was protecting that information with her life. Ceres worked the city's information brokers, skills the Princess of Nia had taught her during years of court intrigue. The picture that emerged was ugly. Eve's final blood match was tomorrow. One more fight, and she'd earn enough to free Liz. But Duke Zwan's family had a pattern. The top gladiators never survived their final match. Dead legends sold more tickets than living ones. Eve Speed was going to die tomorrow, and she didn't know it. We found Eve that evening in a side street near the arena district. She detected us following and turned, sword half drawn, golden eyes, flat. I didn't waste time. Told her about Duke Zwan's plot, told her the final match was rigged, proposed an alternative: escape Monroy with us, take Liz, flee to the Forbidden Witch's hideout in the Demon Zone, where no Duke's bounty hunters would follow. Eve's ears flattened. She asked why I'd help her. Because you know where the witch lives, I said, and I need to find her. She considered it. Then she shook her head. She'd survived 3 years in the arena by trusting her own strength, not strangers, not promises. The blood duel system had made her who she was. She would seize her freedom with her own hands, the way the system promised. I showed her what I could do. Paralyze. Eve froze mid-step, muscles locked, sword arms stopped, golden eyes wide with the terror of someone whose body has been stolen from them. I released her after 3 seconds. That skill killed the 5 dragon warriors, I said. Duke Zwan's arena won't give you a fair fight. I can give you an unfair exit. Saris dropped her disguise. Brown hair brightened to lemon yellow, ears sharpened to points. The most wanted fugitive on the continent, showing her face in a back alley. I am Saris Ashrain, she said, the one the 5 dragon warriors were hunting. Eve stared. She knew the name, but she still said no. She'd seize her freedom with her own hands. If the system betrayed her, she'd deal with it then. I told her we'd be at the bridge near the main gate before dawn. Then we left. On the walk back, we passed a crowd gathered around a house with a black curse mark painted across the wall. Ashinto's work. A man's father had collapsed after they'd attacked the family. Curses as intimidation. The Ashinto were growing bolder by the hour, feeding on the reputation of a kill they hadn't earned. 2 streets later, we saw them. 3 Ashinto members in purple robes, grabbing a woman by the arm. She was crying, begging them to let go. One of them slapped her, told her she should be honored. Saras reached for her sword. Don't, I said. Watch. I targeted the one at the back. Berserk. His eyes unfocused, pupils blew wide, and he launched himself at the closest purple robe with fists swinging. I hit the second with dark, blindness. He crashed into a wall. The third tried to restrain the first, and I pulsed berserk again. They tore into each other. The woman ran. Soldiers arrived and found 3 Ashinto, beating each other bloody with no explanation. We were already 2 blocks away. We leave tonight, I said. Saris's voice carried a note I hadn't heard before. Not quite amusement, not quite satisfaction. Regrettable, she said, that we couldn't stay longer. We collected our things. Pigimaru turned green the moment I picked him up. The egg pulsed warm in my pack. Eve's speed hadn't accepted my offer. She would fight tomorrow in an arena rigged to kill her, trusting a system built by the man who owned her. But I'd planted the seed, given her the truth, a demonstration, and a time and place. Sometimes that's all you can do. We left Monroy under a sky full of stars. Somewhere behind us, a leopard woman was sharpening her sword for a fight she thought she could win. Somewhere ahead, the forbidden witch waited in a demon zone that had killed everyone who'd entered it. The Fly King mask sat in my bag. Not yet, but soon. Eve arrived at the gate before midnight. I heard her footsteps first, the sharp, deliberate stride of someone who'd stopped running from the truth and started running toward it. Saras tensed beside me, hand on her sword. Pigimaru went green, steady, calm. Eve emerged from the shadow of the wall with her cloak drawn tight, golden eyes flat and furious. She didn't explain. She didn't apologize. She looked at me and said 3 words. You were right. She told me what she'd found. Duke Zwan and the guild leader, talking over wine in the arena office while she listened from the hallway. The ritual cup, the ceremonial drink every gladiator takes before their final match, was going to be laced with a paralysis agent. A weak dose, just enough to slow her reflexes, dull her edge. The audience wouldn't notice. They'd see the greatest gladiator in Monroy fall in her last fight, and they'd call it fate. That wasn't the worst part. After she died, the Duke planned to take Liz, not free her, take her. He described her to the guild leader as an investment, a dark elf child who'd grow into something beautiful. He talked about breaking her spirit first, then selling her to a brothel when he got bored. He laughed about it. The guild leader laughed with him. Eve's voice didn't crack when she told me this. It went flat, the way metal sounds when you've heated it past the point where it bends. I spent 3 years trusting a system built by a man who planned to murder me and sell my daughter to a brothel, she said. I believed I could earn our freedom through strength alone. I was a fool. You weren't a fool, I said. You were someone who trusted the rules because breaking them meant risking Liz. That's not stupidity, that's love. She stared at me. Then she nodded, once. Where is she? I asked. The Whitefoot Inn. The innkeeper has her. I looked at Saras. Wait at the sewer entrance near the main gate. We'll meet you there. Understood, Saras said. She touched my arm briefly. Not affection, not hesitation, confirmation. Then she disappeared into the dark. The Whitefoot Inn sat on a narrow street in the merchant district, lamplight seeping through shuttered windows. Eve went in first. I put on the Fly King mask and followed. The innkeeper was a heavyset woman with a voice like a saw blade. When we entered, she was standing over Liz, a small, dark elf girl with skin the color of dusk and wide violet eyes, screaming at her for spilling something. The girl flinched at every syllable. Her shoulders were hunched in the particular way of a child who has learned exactly how to make herself small. I knew that posture. I'd worn it myself, in a house with a father who measured love in bruises and a mother who measured it in silence. Eve crossed the room in 3 steps. The innkeeper saw the leopard ears, the golden eyes, the sword. She opened her mouth to scream. Eve's fist closed it. Then her boot sent the woman sprawling into the counter. Liz. Eve's voice was different now, soft, the blade put away. We're leaving. The girl looked up. Her hands were trembling. She was holding a wooden necklace. Something Eve had given her, I realized. A talisman, a promise. If I'm with you, Liz said, I'll go anywhere. Eve lifted her, gentle. The way you handle something you fought 3 years to hold. She looked at me and I nodded toward the door. Take her to Ceres. I'll handle this. Eve hesitated. The innkeeper was groaning on the floor, crawling toward the back door. Eve knew what I meant by handle. She abused Liz, Eve said quietly. Every day, I know. Eve carried Liz out. The door closed behind them. The innkeeper was on her knees, reaching for a bell pull. I stepped on her wrist. She looked up at me, at the Fly King mask, the compound eyes, the mandibles frozen in their permanent snarl, and the color drained from her face. She begged, she threatened, she invoked Duke Swan's name, his power, his wrath. Then she switched to bargaining. She'd lie about which direction Eve went. She'd say they headed south. She'd buy them time. I watched her cycle through the stages, the way my father used to cycle through them when my uncle came to take me away. Rage, threats, negotiation, tears. The difference was that my uncle had been a gentle man who believed in second chances. I wasn't. Paralyze. She froze mid-plea, dark. Her eyes went blind. She made a small, choked sound, the particular terror of someone whose body and sight have both been stolen in the same breath. Poison. The purple spread through her like ink through water, non-lethal. I had questions to answer first, but I didn't have questions. I knew exactly what she was. I'd lived under someone exactly like her. The girl's flinch when the door slammed, the instinctive crouch, the covered head, the silence that was louder than screaming. I recognized every piece of it, the same way I recognized my own reflection. I drew the dagger I used for materials, held it for a moment, felt nothing, not rage, not satisfaction, just the clean certainty that this woman would never touch a child again. I made it look like a robbery. Coin box emptied, drawers pulled open. The dagger did the rest. Hell is where we're both headed, but she'd get there first. The sewer smelled like stone and old water. Ceres had scouted the exit and confirmed it was clear. I removed the Fly King mask and met them at the entrance. Ceres, Eve, Liz, Pigamaru pressed warm against my ribs. Eve looked at me. She'd heard me come from the direction of the inn. She didn't ask. Hadi was a pseudonym, I said. My real name is Toka Mimori. Eve studied my face, the real face, no mask, no acting. I let her look. This is Pigamaru, I said. He extended a small protrusion from under my robe, a hand. Eve stared at it, then grasped it carefully. Pigamaru turned pink. Liz, I said, the place I'm heading is dangerous. You might lose your life. If that's still okay, I'll take you with me. Liz looked at Eve. Eve nodded. Liz looked back at me and bowed her head, a child's bow, earnest and formal and slightly too deep. I'll go anywhere my sister goes, she said. We moved through the sewers in single file. Ceres led, her wind spirit mapping the tunnels ahead. Eve carried Liz on her back. I brought up the rear, with Pigamaru scanning behind us. The exit opened into forest. The horses were where I'd tied them that afternoon. 2 animals, barely enough for 5 people. Eve took one with Liz. Ceres took the other with me. The egg pulsed warm in my pack. We rode north. They came faster than I expected. Eve heard them first. Her leopard ears rotated backward, tracking sounds I couldn't catch. Lights flickered between the trees. Torch points, maybe 15, moving fast. Pursuit, she said. Multiple groups. The first is cavalry, Duke's soldiers, Muaje. The hooded asynth leader Eve had passed in the arena hallway. He must have read her behavior, connected her absence to me, and reported to the Duke within hours. Smart, dangerously smart. I ran the numbers. The Duke would send his fastest scouts first to track and pin us. The asynth guild professional hunters would follow with tactics. The Duke's main force would come last with numbers. 3 waves, different speeds, different threats. We stopped. Ceres used her light spirit to bind glowing branches to the saddles of the decoy horses and sent them galloping down the main road. Their hoofbeats and the bobbing lights would look like fleeing riders in the dark. Eve, take Liz and hide in the forest, half a mile ahead, off the road. I should fight, Eve said. You will, later. First, let the pieces move. She held my gaze for a moment, then nodded. She disappeared into the trees with Liz, silent as the predator she was. The first wave thundered past within minutes. Duke's cavalry, following the decoy lights, shouting Eve's name into the dark. They didn't even slow down. By the time they caught the riderless horses, they'd be 2 miles past us and furious. I put on the Fly King mask. Saris drew her sword. The second group will be asynth, I said. I need you to buy me time. How much? Until I signal. Go loud. Let them see you. Saris stepped onto the road. I climbed a tree and connected with Pigamaru, his body spreading along the branches, extending my skill range into the canopy. The asynth arrived in 2 formations, 30 in the main group with torches and bows. Eve's ears had caught what my eyes couldn't. 15 more circling through the forest, a flanking team moving without light. I dealt with the flankers first, moved through the trees with Pigamaru dampening my footsteps, found them strung out in a line through the underbrush. Paralyze. Sleep. The dagger for the ones who were still twitching, 15 down in the time it took the main group to reach Saras. Saris played her role perfectly. She stepped into their torchlight, wearing the fly subordinate mask, drew her sword, and held her ground. Muaji stopped the formation. He was sharp. He noticed broken branches, read the trap, tried to negotiate, offered Saris membership in the asynth in exchange for Eve. Saris pretended to consider it. Muaji talked. He talked about their curses, how the asynth had revived the methods of an ancient assassin guild, how their poisons were disguised as dark magic because curses were impossible to disprove. He talked about their plans to use the Duke's family as a stepping stone to political power. He talked because he was stalling, and he was stalling because his second team was circling behind Saris, the second team that was already dead. Saris revealed her true identity, dropped the mask. Lemon yellow hair caught the torchlight. The asynth recognized her instantly. Saris Ashrain, the fugitive, the woman the 5 dragon warriors had been hunting when they died. Every eye locked on her. That's when I hit them. Paralyze through Pigamaru from the treetops. 1 pulse, 30 targets. They dropped like marionettes. Bows clattered. Torches fell and hissed in the damp leaves. Muaji hit the ground face first, his smug smile frozen into a rictus of disbelief. Poison, lethal, all of them. I dropped from the tree. Saras was already moving toward me, breathing hard, but uninjured. Did I live up to expectations? She asked. You exceeded them. She smiled, a small one, tired but real. The first wave came back. The cavalry that had chased the decoys realized they'd been tricked and doubled back, crashing through the forest with the fury of men who'd been made to look foolish. I reached for Paralyze and felt the notification I didn't expect. Target limit reached, 80. The asynth flankers, the main group, the first wave I'd paralyzed before they passed. 80 total. The skill wouldn't accept more. I'd never hit the ceiling before. Every tool has limits. You just don't learn them until you need them most. Dark, I said. Blindness hit the front riders. Horses reared. Men crashed into each other in the dark. Berserk, 3 soldiers in the middle of the formation, turned on their companions. Swords swung wild, directionless, cutting through the confusion. One killed another before a third tackled him off his horse. Chaos bred chaos. Eve appeared from the tree line. She'd heard the fighting. She'd left Liz with Saris and come back because she was Eve's speed. 3 years undefeated, the strongest gladiator in Monroy, a woman who'd spent her entire life being told when and how to fight. Nobody was telling her now. She moved through the blinded, berserk cavalry like a storm through wheat. Her sword was a blur, not wild, not desperate, precise. Every stroke landed where it needed to. She picked up a fallen spear and hurled it through a mounted soldier's chest from 30 feet, and she was smiling. Not the polite smile of someone performing for an arena crowd. A real smile, raw, fierce. The expression of a fighter who'd rediscovered why she picked up a sword in the first place. Not because someone forced her to, but because the fight was hers. She thanked me between kills, not with words, with a look, a nod. The acknowledgement of someone who understood what I'd given her, not freedom, choice. The Duke arrived with his personal guard, a dozen men on armored horses, Duke Zwan in the center, wearing battle plate that had never seen a real fight. He saw the carnage, his first wave scattered, his cavalry shredded, asynth bodies littering the road, and he did what men like him always do. He refused to accept reality. He ordered a charge, offered rewards, promised the next man who killed Eve would be made captain of his private guard. I used Berserk on 2 of his guards. They attacked their companions. Dark on 3 more. Blindness. Panic. Saris put arrows into 2 who tried to flee. Eve cut through the rest with the methodical efficiency of someone who knew exactly how many years of her life these men had stolen. Duke Zwan sat on his horse, alone. surrounded by the bodies of every man who'd ever served him. Paralyze. He froze, toppled sideways off his horse, and hit the ground with the wet, heavy sound of a man in armor landing on soft earth. His eyes were rolling, wild, the whites bright in the torchlight. He tried to speak, managed only a choked gurgling, the words of a man who'd never been denied anything in his life, confronted with the first thing he couldn't buy or bully away. I walked over, looked down at him. Then I turned my back. Eve. She was beside me, breathing hard, spotted fur dark with sweat and blood that wasn't hers. Golden eyes bright with something I recognized. The cold, clean fire that burns after you've been caged so long you've forgotten what the sky looks like. He's yours, I said, if you want him. She looked at the Duke, the man who'd owned her since she was a child, who'd enslaved her, worked her, bled her for profit, and when she'd finally earned what the system promised, planned to poison her and sell the girl she loved to a brothel. She drew her sword, stood over him. The paralysis held him flat, eyes staring up at the woman he'd treated as property for a decade. Farewell, Eve said. One stroke, clean. She stood there for a moment, sword dripping, chest heaving. Then she exhaled, a long, shuddering breath that carried years of cages and arenas and ritual cups, and the sound of a crowd cheering for her blood. Thank you, she said, without turning around. I don't know why, but I feel happy to be able to fight like this. I didn't answer. Some things don't need words. Saris emerged from the forest with Liz. The girl's eyes were wide. She could see the bodies, smell the blood, but she didn't flinch. Eve had told me once that Liz had traveled hard roads before. She'd seen dead men. It's over, I said. Saris assessed the scene with a soldier's eye. No survivors? None. I appointed Saris as deputy leader of the Fly King's battle group. She accepted with a nod that carried more weight than any ceremony. Eve watched without comment. She understood hierarchy. She'd lived inside one her entire life. This one, at least, was built on trust instead of chains. Liz tugged at Saris's sleeve. I want to help, she said. Please. Saris looked at her, a child who'd been beaten for asking questions, now asking permission to be useful. She knelt down and handed Liz a pack. Carry this. Stay close. Liz clutched it like a treasure. I pulled Eve aside. There was one more thing to do before we left. You told me the Asynth disguised their poisons as curses, I said. That their entire reputation is built on making people believe they're a curse organization. That's what Muaji boasted about. His curses are pharmacy, not magic. Perfect. I walked to the nearest Asynth corpse, the purple robe, the crest on the chest. I looked at the body and thought about what I knew. The 5 dragon warriors, the strongest military unit on the continent, were dead because I'd paralyzed and poisoned them in a forest. The Ashinto cult had claimed the kill. Their reputation had swelled. Nobody questioned it because nobody could prove otherwise. But bodies tell stories. Dead Asynth members, found in a forest with their poisons and their robes, could be examined, investigated, connected. If anyone competent looked at these corpses, they might start asking questions about what kind of poisons the Asynth used, whether those poisons matched the toxicology of the 5 dragon warriors' deaths, whether the group that claimed the kill and the group that actually died here were connected. Bodies are evidence. I needed them gone. Freeze. The nearest corpse crystallized. A thin sheen of frost spread across the skin, the armor, the purple robe. The body went still in a way that was different from death, harder, more permanent. I handed Eve a heavy hammer we'd taken from the dead soldier Costello. Hit it, I said. She swung. The frozen corpse exploded into powder, fine as flour. The wind took it instantly, white dust scattering into the dark forest, mixing with the leaves and the dirt and the nothing. Eve stared at the empty space where a body had been. Living things become indestructible when frozen, I said. Dead things become brittle. I tested it. Understanding moved across her face. Then, something colder, appreciation. We worked through the Asynth corpses one by one. Freeze, hammer, powder. Saris used a smaller hammer on the ones closer to the road. The bodies of the Duke's soldiers we left. They were unremarkable, untraceable, just dead men in a forest. But the Asynth were specific. Their robes, their equipment, their faces could be identified. So we erased them. Every Asynth member, every purple robe, every vial of poison, ground to powder and scattered by the wind. Muaji's body was last. I froze him, and Eve brought the hammer down with enough force to crack stone. He came apart like dry clay. When we finished, there was nothing left. No bodies, no evidence, no proof that the Asynth Guild had been anywhere near this forest. The 5 dragon warriors' killers had vanished permanently. Anyone investigating their deaths would find the Ashinto cult's boasts, the Asynth's disappearance, and absolutely zero evidence to contradict the story. The framing was locked forever. We gathered the horses, loaded the packs. Liz carried her bag without complaint. Eve walked beside her, sword cleaned and sheathed, her stride different from before, lighter. The weight of a decade lifted in one night. "The Demon Zone," Eve said. "Half a day's ride. I know a route through the outer perimeter." "The Forbidden Witch? I'll take you to her." Dawn was bleeding through the trees. 5 of us now. Toka Mimori, Saris Ashrain, Eve Speed, Lizbeth, and a slime named Pigamaru, who turned pink when Liz scratched the top of his head. The Fly King's battle group, still small, still hunted, but the pieces were falling into place. An avenger, a knight, a gladiator, a child, and a weapon disguised as a pet. Each one discarded by a system that measured worth in ranks and birth and obedience. Each one still alive because someone decided they mattered. The egg pulsed warm in my pack. Pigamaru was green against my chest. The forest smelled like rain and old blood and the beginning of something. The goddess still thought I was dead. The world still thought the Ashinto had killed the 5 dragon warriors. And somewhere ahead, past a zone full of monsters that had killed everyone who'd entered, a witch waited who might hold the key to everything I needed. We rode toward the dawn. The rain hit like a wall. One moment, the sky was gray and heavy. The next, the forest disappeared behind sheets of water so thick I couldn't see my own hand. Eve found the cave, her night vision cutting through what the rest of us couldn't, and we ducked inside just as the first thunder cracked overhead. It was small, low ceiling, stone floor, a narrow mouth that kept the worst of the wind out, enough room for 5 people if nobody minded shoulders touching. We didn't. Eve brought the horses under a rock overhang nearby. She came back shaking water from her ears. Spotted fur slicked flat against her jaw, and accepted the dry cloth I offered without a word. "Rest and eat," I said. "We enter the Demon Zone tomorrow." Liz peeled vegetables while Eve started a fire. Saris laid out dry clothes for Liz behind a makeshift curtain, a cloak draped over 2 propped spears. The domesticity of it caught me off guard. 4 fugitives and a slime, cooking dinner in a cave on the edge of a monster-infested wilderness, and it felt more like home than any house I'd lived in. Pigamaru settled against the cave wall in rest mode, still drained from the ambush. The egg pulsed warm in my pack. It had been doing that more often lately, a slow, steady rhythm, like a heartbeat learning to keep time. After dinner, Eve and Liz fell asleep almost instantly. The tension that had kept them both upright since Monroy finally let go, and they dropped like stones. Eve slept with one arm around Liz, her sword within reach. Liz clutched the wooden necklace Eve had given her, the one she'd held through every beating at that inn. They looked peaceful. That was rare enough to be worth protecting. Saris and I sat near the fire. She was combing her hair, lemon yellow strands catching the firelight, her ears visible now that the disguise was down, long, elegant points that twitched slightly when she was relaxed. I reached over and touched the tip of her left ear. She flinched, not from fear, from embarrassment. A flush crept up her neck, and she pulled away with the controlled dignity of someone pretending that absolutely nothing had happened. "Toka dono," she said, her voice perfectly even. "That is quite sensitive, I know." She gave me a look that would have frozen a lesser man. "Saras, you've followed me since I had nothing but a leather bag and a half-dead slime. You've killed for me, bled for me, lost sleep keeping that disguise up every night. So I want you to know, one wish, anything I can give you whenever you want to ask. No conditions." She studied the fire. The comb stopped moving in her hair. "I'll think about it seriously," she said. "Good night, Tokadono. Sleep." The skill washed over her gently. Her eyelids dropped, the comb slipped from her fingers, and she leaned sideways until her head rested against the cave wall. 3 hours, dreamless. The only rest her body could get while the disguise magic drained her life force every waking moment. I sat alone with the fire and the sound of rain and 4 people who trusted me with their lives. I'd later learn that while we sheltered in that cave, the world outside was tightening like a fist. King Jin of Ulsa panicked when the asynth vanished and Duke Xuan turned up dead. His strongest political tool and his most useful nobleman, both gone overnight. He ordered a full search, but there was nothing to find. We'd ground the evidence to powder. The goddess read the report with her usual serene smile. The Ashinto cult, the asynth disappearance, the dead duke. She called it troublesome. Then she turned to bigger concerns. The Great Demon Emperor's army was massing near the Great Oath Wall. She announced that every hero would fight, regardless of rank. A warrior named Banewolf, the Dragon Slayer, volunteered to train Ayaka's group when nobody else would. The goddess hadn't assigned them a trainer. One of the Takao sisters called her out on it, and Banewolf stepped in before the silence could turn ugly. He asked for good wine as payment. The goddess used his father's medicine as leverage, a rare drug from Ulza's mines, provided free under her mediation. One word from her, and the supply stops. His father dies. She controlled everyone. The heroes through rank, Banewolf through his father, the kingdoms through fear, a cage for every person, sized exactly to their weakness. I hadn't met Banewolf, but I understood his chains. They were the same shape as mine had been. We entered the demon zone at dawn. Eve activated the hereditary map, a holographic display triggered by my mana flowing into her palm. 2 light points appeared. Green for us, red for the Forbidden Witch. Still far, but real. The Fly King's battle group, Sarah said as we walked. She'd proposed the name the night before, taken from the legend of Belzija, the demon lord who held an island fortress for 100 years. I'd agreed. It fit. A king of pests, something the world underestimated until it was too late. Eve took point. She'd been in the outer edges before, briefly hidden here with Liz during an earlier escape attempt. She knew the water sources, the shelters, the rule about golden-eyed monster meat being unpredictably toxic. Don't eat anything you kill, she said. Not until I check it. Liz carried the heaviest pack. She'd insisted, planting her feet with the quiet stubbornness of someone who'd spent years being told she was useless. I want to help, she said. Please. I let her. Sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is let them prove they're not what the world told them they were. We walked. I asked Liz how she was holding up. This place is less scary than the inn, she said. She said it simply. No drama, no self-pity. Just a child stating a fact that the demon zone, with its golden-eyed monsters and its screaming dark, was less frightening than the woman who'd beaten her every day in a building with clean sheets and lamplight. The first monster came an hour in. An algae-headed lizard burst from the underbrush. Golden eyes, twin blade-tipped tails slicing the air. Paralyze. It froze. I tested the others. Poison, sleep, both effective. The demon zone's monsters were vulnerable to every status ailment I had. This wasn't survival territory. This was a hunting ground. We pushed deeper. The monsters grew stronger, but the pattern held. Paralyze stopped them. Poison finished them, and Eve and Saris trained against the ones we left alive long enough to fight. Eve moved through combat with a fluidity born from 10,000 arena matches. Saris used her spirit magic with the precision of a knight trained under royalty. The river crossing went wrong twice. Liz slipped on a whetstone halfway across. Pigamaru shot out a protrusion from under my robe, stretching across the gap, and caught her by the arm before the current could take her. She hung there for a moment, violet eyes wide, then scrambled up with Pigamaru's help. Thank you, Pigamaru-chan, she whispered. Pigamaru turned pink. Saris went next. She made it to the far bank, stepped on the last stone, and her foot went out from under her. She hit the water with a splash that was entirely too undignified for a former captain of the Ni Holy Kingdom's Saint Knights. She climbed out dripping, hair plastered to her face, ears flat with mortification. I gave her my robe. Not a word, she said. I wasn't going to say anything. Your face said it. 2 giant slug monsters attacked near the end of the first day. Nizot, massive things with elephant trunk appendages and humanoid arms jutting from their sides, golden eyes gleaming with predatory hunger. Eve went pale. She'd encountered them before. Paralyze. Both froze. I used Berserk on the larger one. It turned on itself, tearing its own flesh, thrashing until the bleeding wouldn't stop. The second I poisoned. They died within minutes. Level 1797 to 1798. The materials from their paw-like hands were exactly what I needed for Pigamaru's enhancement formula. I collected them while Saris cataloged the entry in the Forbidden Techniques Encyclopedia. We made camp, ate, slept in shifts, moved on. The egg hatched on the 3rd day. I felt the presence before I heard the sound. Something warm and enormous blooming from my pack. Not threatening, not hostile, just arriving, like the last note of a song that had been building for weeks. Toka, Eve said, hand on her sword. Something's wrong. Not wrong, I said. I pulled the pack from my shoulders and opened it. The black egg sat in its wrapping, and it was cracking. Fine lines spreading across the shell, pulsing with each fracture. The mysterious presence we'd all felt. Sarah sweating, Eve tensing, Pigamaru going still, was coming from inside. The shell split. A small white creature tumbled out, about the size of a cat, with dark liquid eyes and tiny hooves. It looked up at me and made a sound like a bell chiming underwater. Little horse, Liz breathed. It wasn't a horse. Horses don't hatch from eggs, but it looked like one. A miniature foal, pure white, wobbling on unsteady legs. It pressed its nose into my palm, warm, trusting, the way newborn things trust the first face they see. What will you do, Toka? Eve asked. Saris noticed the organ first, a translucent half-sphere on the creature's neck, a mana absorption crystal, the kind found in high-level magical beasts. She'd read about them in the encyclopedia. If I give it mana, I said, we'll see what it really is. 1,000 MP flowed through my hand and into the crystal. The white creature shuddered, grew. Its coat darkened from white to coal black. Its legs lengthened, thickened, and when it stopped, a full-sized black horse stood before us with the same dark, gentle eyes. It lowered its head, The crystal pulsed. It wanted more. 10,000 MP, everything I could spare. The transformation was violent this time, bones cracking, muscles swelling, the horse's body doubling in size. 4 legs became 8. Horns erupted from its skull, curving backward like a ram's. Its eyes shifted from dark to burning red. An 8-legged demonic steed stood in the clearing, massive, horned, red-eyed, something out of a nightmare, except it looked at me with the same gentle recognition as the tiny white creature that had tumbled from a cracked shell moments ago. Slay, I said, the first 3 letters of Sleipnir, the 8-legged horse from the mythology I'd grown up with, in a world this one would never know. Your name is Slay. Slay tossed her head and neighed. Her tail swung. The 8 legs stamped once, together, and the ground trembled. Then, she walked up to Ceres and licked her face. A long, wet, thorough lick from chin to forehead. Ceres stood frozen, not from Paralyze, but from the sheer indignity of being slobbered on by a demonic warhorse. Her hair was plastered sideways. Her composure was in ruins. She seems to like you, I said. I noticed. Eve informed us Slay was female. Slay confirmed this by walking back to me, shrinking down to her small white mascot form with a soft chime and curling up at my feet. She could transform freely. Full demonic steed when we needed a mount. Tiny adorable creature when we didn't. Pigamaru approached cautiously. Slay sniffed him. He sniffed her. Then, Pigamaru climbed onto Slay's back, and she took off running around the clearing. A pink slime riding a tiny white horse, both of them making sounds that could only be described as joy. Liz laughed, actually laughed, a sound I'd never heard from her before, bright and sudden, like she'd surprised herself by making it. Eve's golden eyes softened. Ceres wiped horse drool from her face with as much dignity as she could salvage, which wasn't much. The egg from the Skeleton King's skull, carried through dungeons, through cities, through ambushes and sewers and a night of killing. And it became this, a creature that played with my slime and licked my partner's face and made a traumatized child laugh. Some seeds take a long time to bloom. When they do, you remember why you carried them. 3 more days of travel, deeper into the demon zone. The monsters grew stronger, but so did we. Eve and Ceres took turns fighting, Eve with her blade, Ceres with her spirit-forged armor and wind magic. I supported them, paralyzed threats they couldn't handle, poisoned the ones too dangerous to leave alive. Slay carried Liz and the luggage in her second form. In her third form, the 8-legged steed. She was faster than anything in the demon zone. We used that sparingly. The MP cost was significant, and I needed reserves. On the 3rd evening, Eve scouted ahead and came back with news. There's a structure, like a stepped pyramid, ancient. The door has a gem lock. I pushed mana into the gem until it glowed, and the door ground open. Inside, a wide chamber, stone stairs leading to an elevated platform. No monsters, no traps, just old stone and silence. We set up camp. That night, Ceres combed her hair by the fire and spoke about Princess Catlia, the woman she'd served, the woman whose kingdom had been invaded because the goddess wanted Ceres. Catlia had been arranged to marry Shibito of Bakuos. Ceres didn't say how she felt about that. She didn't need to. The way her comb stopped moving told me everything. She's strong, Ceres said. She's clever. She'll be fine. I didn't challenge it. Some things people say to survive, not to convince. Slay and Pigamaru chased each other around the chamber, their sounds echoing off ancient stone. Liz watched them with that quiet smile, the wooden necklace turning between her fingers. Found family, the kind you build from broken pieces the world threw away. Morning, we packed up. 8, prepared to move. I opened the ruins door, and the air changed. Something was waiting at the base of the stairs. I felt it before I saw it. A presence that prickled along my spine the same way the Soul Eater had, back in the dungeon where everything began. Dark, sadistic, patient. Eve, don't step out yet. I looked down the stone staircase. The human-faced species sat at the bottom, like it had been there all night. It was the most disturbing thing I'd ever seen. A bullet-shaped body, covered in countless short legs, like an insect, magnified to the size of a carriage. And the faces, dozens of them, grafted across its surface. Human faces, each one with its eyes sewn shut, mouths frozen in various expressions of agony, except one face in the center, eyes open, mouth curved in a smile that had nothing human behind it. It growled. The sound came from every mouth at once, a wet, guttural drone that vibrated in my chest. Ceres went pale beside me. Eve's hand tightened on her sword. Even Slay, in mascot form on my shoulder, pressed closer. We have to kill it, I said. We tested it. Saras shot an arrow. The moment it left the bowstring, tentacles erupted from the sewn mouths, dozens of fleshy appendages that shredded the arrow to splinters before it came within 10 feet. The speed was inhuman. The tentacles retracted instantly. I threw a stone. It bounced off the creature's body. No tentacles, no reaction. The thing didn't even flinch. It only attacked threats. Arrows were weapons. Stones were debris. The distinction was instant and absolute. It can't climb, Eve said, studying the footprints in the dirt. It's been circling the ruin since last night. Flat ground only. We had safety. We had time. But we couldn't stay here forever, and the creature knew it. That smile on its one open face said everything. It was patient. It would wait. Sooner or later, we'd have to come down. I'd later learn that across the continent, dead men were being found in the demon zone. Spies who'd killed themselves the moment they were discovered. Agents the goddess had sent to watch her own heroes. Even the people she'd summoned, armed, and trained. She didn't trust enough to leave unwatched. Banewolf confronted her about it. She smiled and changed the subject to his father's medicine. Everyone was a piece on her board. Every piece had a cage. But the creature in front of me didn't care about boards or goddesses or politics. It cared about one thing, destroying anything that came close enough to be a threat. I felt something dark stir in my chest, not fear, anticipation. The same cold satisfaction I'd felt standing over the innkeeper, standing over the Duke's soldiers, standing over every person and monster that had made the mistake of thinking I was prey. Eve, I said, can you ride sleigh? She looked at the demonic steed, then at me. Understanding moved across her face. The decoy roll, she said. You ride past it, draw the tentacles. When it moves to intercept, there's an opening. It can only attack after it finishes moving, not during. That gap is where I hit it. Eve mounted sleigh in her full steed form. 8 legs, horns, red eyes blazing. Saras offered wind spirit support for extra speed. Pigamaru fused with me, his body spreading under my robe, tentacles coiled and ready. I know it's dangerous, Eve said from the saddle. You don't need to say it. I'm counting on you. Sleigh charged. 8 hooves hit the earth like drumbeats. Eve leaned low, bow in hand. Golden eyes locked on the creature. Sleigh neighed, loud, defiant, and the human face species turned. Every face pointed at Eve. Every sewn mouth trembled. The one smiling face contorted with rage, and the creature moved, surging forward on its countless legs, tentacles erupting from every orifice. There, the gap between the moment it stopped moving and the moment the tentacles reached full extension. Pijamaru's bundled tentacles launched me forward. I crossed the distance in a heartbeat and slammed my palm against the creature's body. Paralyze. It froze. Every leg locked. Every tentacle went rigid. The faces twisted in silent screams, dozens of mouths opening and closing with no sound. Eyes behind sewn lids rolling wild. Berserk! The creature turned on itself. The tentacles reversed, plunging into its own body, tearing through flesh and chitin. Blood erupted from every face. The smiling one stopped smiling. Its mouth opened wide, and the sound that came out was the most human thing about it. A long, shuddering wail that echoed off the ancient stone walls. Then, silence. Level 1797 to 1903. Over 100 levels from a single kill. The creature's materials were rare, components I'd need for forbidden arts. Saras collected them while I caught my breath. Eve dismounted. Sleigh transformed back to mascot form and climbed onto Saras's shoulder, nuzzling her neck. Eve looked at the dead creature, at me, at the team. I couldn't have done that alone, I said. None of us could, Eve said. That's why we're here. She was right. The decoy, the mount, the range extension, the paralyze, the kill. 5 moving parts, each one essential. I looked at Sarah's cataloging materials, at Eve cleaning her bow, at Liz feeding Sleigh a piece of dried fruit, the little white horse chewing happily while Pigamaru bounced on her back. We weren't fugitives anymore. We were a battle group. And somewhere ahead, past the ruins and the wilderness that had killed everyone who'd entered it, the forbidden witch waited with answers I'd been chasing since the dungeon. We checked the map. The red point was closer now, days away, not weeks. We walked deeper. Eve told me her dream on the morning everything went wrong. We were close. The red point on the map had grown from a distant smudge to something almost touchable, its edge overlapping our green light. A day's walk, maybe 2. The trees here were darker, twisted things that dripped with moisture even when it wasn't raining, and the wind tasted like stone and old earth. Saras identified the material I'd harvested from the human face species, an amplification stone component, page 167 of the Forbidden Techniques Encyclopedia. She held the triple-layered hemp bag open while I sorted the pieces, and then she screamed. An earthworm, tangled in with the monster parts, small, brown, harmless. Ceres launched herself backwards so fast she nearly knocked Liz over. Her face went white. This was the same woman who'd stood unflinching beside a nightmare creature covered in sewn-shut human faces, and a common earthworm had broken her. Eve picked it up, dangled it towards Ceres with the particular deadpan expression of someone who'd found a weakness worth exploiting. "Stop," Liz said quietly. Eve stopped. Even the undefeated gladiator of Monroy listened when Liz used that voice. I threw the earthworm away. Ceres straightened up, dusted herself off, and looked at me with the fierce dignity of someone daring me to comment. I didn't, but I let one corner of my mouth twitch. She caught it. Her ears flattened. "Not a word, Tokadono. We needed that. The demon zone had been grinding us down. No safe havens, no rest stops, sleeping in shifts with one eye open." Slay was exhausted from maintaining her third form during the boss fight, staying in mascot mode on my shoulder, making soft chiming sounds. Pigamaru was drained too, nestled warm against my chest. We were a tired, battered group, walking the last stretch of an impossible road. That's when Eve stopped walking. She turned to face all of us. Her golden eyes moved from Ceres to Liz, to Pigamaru, to Slay, to me. Something in her expression shifted, the permanent guard dropping, the arena mask lowering. "I want to thank you," she said. "Without all of you, Liz and I could never have come this far." "Piggy-chan and Su-chan too," Liz added. Eve nodded. Then, she said the thing I'd replay in my head for hours afterward, while I was drowning in rain and blood and the screaming of 100 monsters. "When this is over," Eve said, "I want to live somewhere quiet, just Liz and me, maybe a small house, a garden. I want to cook meals that aren't rations. I want to sleep without one hand on my sword." She paused. "I want Liz to grow up without being afraid." Liz's eyes filled. She reached for Eve's hand. Saras smiled, genuine, warm. I should have savored it longer. The peaceful moment before the world caved in. The monster appeared above Eve without sound. No presence, no vibration, no warning from Pigamaru or Slay. One moment the air was empty, and the next, something was there. A bizarre thing, like a disembodied lower jaw, 2 meters long, golden front teeth extending like tentacles, no upper body at all. Eve drew and killed it in a single motion. Instinct. 3 years of arena reflexes firing before thought could intervene. I opened my mouth to stop her. Too late. The creature's death scream hit like a physical wall, a metallic shriek that tore through the forest, accompanied by a burst of blinding light that erupted upward through the canopy. A death-triggered spell, the same principle as the 5 dragon warriors' trap. Kill the bait, and the real threat comes. I dropped to one knee and pressed my palm flat against the ground. Vibrations, hundreds of them, coming from every direction. The heavy, rhythmic drumming of countless legs moving in unison. The same guttural presence I'd felt from the human-faced species boss, multiplied beyond counting. The dead creature was a biological alarm. Its only purpose was to die and, in dying, summon every human-faced species in the zone. "Everyone," I said, "get away from here, now." The ground was shaking. Eve went pale. Ceres's hand flew to her sword. Liz grabbed Slay and held her tight. Eve spoke first. "I'll be the bait. This is my fault. I'll lead them away while you escape to the witch." "No. Toka, I have the status ailment skills. They work at range through Pigamaru. I'm the only one who can survive being chased by a horde this size. If I stay with you, we all die. If I go alone, you hide and I grind through them." Eve's jaw tightened. She wanted to argue. She wanted to take the burden because the guilt was eating her alive. But she was a soldier and she knew I was right. The cave we'd passed an hour ago. The dead-end hole in the cliff wall. Useless for anything except shelter. "Take Ceres and Liz to that cave," I said. "Stay hidden. Don't come out until the swarm passes, or I come back for you." "Tokadono," Ceres said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "May fortune favor you," I said. "I mean it." Slay transformed. Mascot form to full demonic steed in a heartbeat. 8 legs, horns, red eyes blazing. 10,000 MP drained from my pool like water from a cracked cup. But she was ready. I mounted. I put on the Fly King mask. Pressed the amplification stone I'd built from the human-faced species materials into the mouthpiece. Untested, experimental, potentially useless. Then I nodded at Pigamaru. He understood. He always understood. "PG!" The sound erupted outward through the mask's amplification. A massive, distorted scream that echoed across the wetlands like a thunderclap. Every monster within a mile heard it. Every presence in the ground shifted direction, toward me. "Go," I told Eve. "Protect them." Slay charged. 8 hooves tearing through mud and dead leaves, horns low, heading straight into the gap between 2 approaching waves of vibrations. Behind me, I heard Ceres call my name once. Then the forest swallowed it. I asked Pigamaru if he could keep going. Green. I asked Slay. She snorted and kicked harder. Two creatures who'd been bullied and discarded, running into the dark with the discarded human who'd found them. We were all the same thing, runts that refused to die. Rain. It hit within minutes of the separation. Cold, heavy, relentless. The kind that doesn't fall so much as pour. Sheets of water that turned the forest floor to mud and the air to gray static. I couldn't see 20 feet ahead. My mask collected water against the eye holes, blurring everything to shapes and movement. I scattered Pigamaru's tentacles behind us as we ran. The first wave of monsters hit them, and I cast berserk. They turned on each other, human-faced species crashing into golden-eyed beasts, tentacles flailing, bodies colliding in the mud. The chaos bought 30 seconds. Then, the smarter ones adapted. The human-faced species used fire attacks to burn the tentacles. Others used their dead as shields, trampling corpses to close the gap. These weren't mindless. They learned. Paralyze. A pulse through Pigamaru's scattered protrusions. 12 monsters froze mid-stride. The ones behind crashed into them, creating a pileup. 4 seconds of frozen chaos before the paralysis broke and the pile untangled itself. 4 seconds. That's all Paralyze bought against this many targets. I pulled Slay to a stop in the rain and ran the numbers. MP draining steadily. Slay's third form consumed mana continuously, and every skill activation cut deeper. At this rate, I had maybe 30 minutes before I ran dry. After that, no skills, no Pigamaru fusion, no advantage over the horde except a sword and dying faster, unless I leveled up. The rule from the disposal ruins. Experience points only transfer if you're close enough when the monster dies. Close combat. Kill them near enough to absorb the XP. Level up. Recover MP. Keep fighting. I looked at Pigamaru. He was exhausted but green. I looked at Slay. Her crystal was dimming, mana draining for her form. I pushed more into her, and she surged forward. "Let's go," I said. We turned and charged into the horde. What followed was the longest fight of my life. Hit and run. Charge into a cluster. Berserk the nearest group. While they tore each other apart, swing close enough to absorb the XP when one fell. Wheel Slay around. Flee before the next wave arrived. Find another cluster. Repeat. Dark. 3 letters. Fastest skill to cast. It blinded the front runners, buying time for longer skill names. Paralyze came next. 5 syllables that felt like eternity when a wolf-headed monster was lunging for your throat. Rain washed away scent. That helped. The horde couldn't track me by smell, but they could track by sound, by vibration, by the simple fact that I was the only human-shaped thing running through their territory. Level 1903 to 1921. The MP refill from leveling hit like a cold drink in a desert. Temporary, precious, gone in minutes. Slay saved me from an ambush. A monster burst from the underbrush while I was mid-cast, jaws aimed at my leg. She kicked it in the face with her rear hooves, then stomped its skull flat without breaking stride. I set a trap, hid behind a fallen tree, used Paralyze on the pursuers as they came around the corner, Berserk on the frozen ones. They woke up violent, attacking everything nearby. More XP, level 1929. A scythe-armed monster appeared from nowhere, massive, long range, cutting down trees with sweeping blade limbs. It scored a hit on a giant human-faced species. The giant turned on it in fury. They fought. I watched from 30 feet away, waited until both were weakened, then hit them both with Paralyze and let Berserk finish the job. Fisherman's Prophet, level 1966. I checked my status screen, saw the title, E-rank hero, the goddess's joke, the label she'd slapped on me before throwing me into a dungeon to die. I was still wearing it, level 1966, and still branded with the rank she'd given me the day she decided I was garbage. I'll trample everything, every monster in this zone, every rank she assigned, every cage she built. I spat mud and charged back in. The mask was the problem. Rain pooled in the eye holes. Water dripped across the painted mandibles. Every breath came wet and labored through the mouthpiece. But I couldn't remove it. The amplification stone embedded in it was the only thing keeping Pigamaru's sound projection effective. Then, one of the smarter ones figured out the mask. A human-faced species with corpse shield tactics. It dragged dead bodies in front of itself, blocking my line of sight. I couldn't use Paralyze on what I couldn't see. It stayed behind its wall of corpses and fired laser-like attacks from overhead, raining destruction from a distance while I dodged on Slay's back. I took the mask off, filled it with rainwater, propped it on a branch at head height, a decoy. The corpse shield monster focused on it. While its attention was locked on the fake target, Pigamaru launched me upward on bundled tentacles. I came down above the creature and slammed my palm against its body. Paralyze. It froze. Berserk finished it. A projectile hit Slay, not from the corpse user, from behind. A one-eyed, four-legged thing I'd never seen before. It generated spear-like projectiles from organs in its body and launched them like artillery. The spear caught Slay in the side. She screamed. A a raw animal sound that cut through the rain and the chaos and hit me somewhere deeper than any wound I'd taken. She kept running, blood streaming from her flank, 8 legs still pounding the mud, red eyes still blazing. She looked at me, just a glance, but her eyes said what words couldn't. Keep fighting. I'll carry you. A wolf-bodied monster with a human face charged us. I didn't dodge. I cast Berserk directly on it, then grabbed its mane and swung onto its back. It bucked, howled, then turned and sprinted, straight toward the projectile monster that had hit Sly. The berserked wolf tore into it with the mindless fury of a creature that had lost all self-preservation. I jumped clear as both went down. Slay was limping but still standing. A spear had gone through my left shoulder somewhere in the chaos. I hadn't felt it until now. Level 2017, 2019. My status screen flickered. A new line appeared. Skill unlocked. Slow. Evolved from Paralyze. Not binary like its parent, Slow was graduated. It didn't freeze. It reduced speed proportionally. Everything in range moved like it was wading through honey. 5,000 MP per activation. Continuous drain. Affected all enemies in the area, regardless of line of sight. New weapon. Forged from a night of blood and rain. Level 2000. The number meant more than mathematics. When the counter rolled past that threshold, every drop of MP in my body refilled. Full tank, bone dry to overflowing in an instant. And underneath the flood of restored mana, another notification. Berserk LV2 unlocked. Object specification. Instead of hitting everything nearby, I could choose my target. Instead of scattered chaos, I could direct the madness. The second wind hit like a wall of cold air. My vision sharpened. My hands stopped shaking. For one perfect moment, the exhaustion lifted and I could breathe without tasting blood. Then I spent it, all of it. Every recovered point poured into the final stretch. Pigamaru reached his limit before I did. The tentacles stopped responding. His color faded from green to gray, and his body went limp around my waist. I disconnected from the fusion gently. Rest, I told him. You've done enough. More than enough. He made a small, weak sound. I tucked him inside my robe where it was warm. Slay was bleeding from 2 legs. She'd taken another hit at some point. I hadn't seen when. Her crystal was almost dark, but she was still standing, still carrying me. If it gets worse, I said, take Pigamaru and run. Find Saras. She snorted, kicked the ground. Her meaning was clear. She wasn't leaving. I removed the mask, spat blood. The rain hit my bare face, and it felt like waking up. 3 monsters left, then 2, then 1. A cunning thing that used corpses as a shield and refused to let me see it. I circled, found the angle, cast slow. It moved like it was drowning in air. I walked up to it, put my hand on its body, and said the word. Berserk. It tore itself apart. Silence. No more vibrations in the ground. No more screams in the rain. Just the sound of water falling on dead things, and the heavy, ragged breathing of a boy who'd been fighting since the world decided he wasn't worth keeping. Level 2019. New skill. Battered body. Companions alive. Horde dead. I tested slow on the stragglers that appeared as I walked. 5,000 MP per use. Continuous drain. Affected everything in range, not just line of sight. Allies in physical contact were immune. It was expensive, but against groups, it was devastating. I carried Slay in her mascot form. She weighed almost nothing. Pigamaru was motionless against my chest. The rain was slowing. The forest was quiet, the kind of quiet that follows catastrophe. Then Slay's tail wagged. She lifted her head, ears forward, and made a sound I recognized. A monster fell dead 10 feet from me. Clean sword cut to the throat, arrow wound in the forehead. Precision kills, the kind only one person I knew could deliver. Sarah stepped out of the rain. Finally found you, she said. My master. I'd later learn what happened on the hero side while I was fighting for my life. The horde I'd drawn away was massive, but not all of it followed me. Some of the human-faced species swept through the wider zone, crossing into the territory where the goddess's heroes were stationed. 2 classmates from Anne's group died, Haruka and Sakuma, crushed and torn by monsters, too fast for their low-level skills to handle. Ayaka confronted An. She asked him why he hadn't protected them. He was A rank. He had the power. He had the responsibility. Anne's answer was exactly what I'd expect from someone who'd smiled to my face and thought I was garbage in his heart. He told Ayaka that everyone was responsible for their own survival, that the priority was protecting high-ranked heroes, meaning himself, that Haruka and Sakuma had been weak, and the weak die. He delivered this verdict with the calm certainty of a man who'd never been weak himself. Kirihara intervened. not to defend Ayaka, to mock On. He gave a speech about vessels and capacity. He called On a small container trying to hold power meant for bigger people. An snapped, revealed his unique skill, Black Flame, and challenged Kirihara right there, over the bodies of their dead classmates. Kirihara dismissed him. Then he turned on Ayaka, telling her that an S rank without a unique skill was worse than an A rank with one, a drag on morale. He walked away muttering about needing to show his superiority more clearly. A girl named Kabato went missing after the stampede. She'd gone to search for separated group members and never came back. Asagi refused to help look for her. When Ayaka volunteered, the Shikyosei told her she was too weak and would be a hindrance. Ayaka checked her status. Level 143, S rank title, no unique skill. She vowed to become stronger. She said it quietly, to herself, standing in the rain where nobody could see her face. I didn't know any of this at the time. I'd learn it later, in pieces, from reports and fragments. But that night, while I was grinding through monsters in the mud, the system that threw me away was eating its own children. Eve found me next. She appeared through the trees like a ghost, golden eyes cutting through the dark, two swords bloody, spotted fur slicked with rain. She'd left the cave against my orders. She started to apologize. I stopped her after the first sentence. One apology is enough, I said. By my standards, you don't owe one at all. She'd noticed something I'd tried to hide, my sleep deprivation. I'd been using sleep on the party every night to help them rest at the cost of my own. Eve had figured it out, argued with Saris, and left Liz in Saris's care. Then, she tracked me through the forest, following broken branches and battle scars in the mud. But she hadn't found me first. Eve told me she'd encountered other people in the demon zone, not monsters, humans, isekai heroes, summoned by the goddess, just like my classmates. A frightened girl who turned out to be anything but. The younger Takao sister, Tree, had attacked Eve with lightning magic the moment she laid eyes on her. 2 release levels of power, enough to immobilize a gladiator who'd never lost a fight. Eve had survived through instinct, speed, and the fact that Tree's attacks had limited range. Then, the older sister intervened. Takao Sei, Shiori. She stopped the fight, communicated with Eve through gestures across the language barrier, and established no hostility. She knew Eve's name, had gathered intelligence, assembled information from sources Eve couldn't guess. Analytical, calm, the kind of dangerous that doesn't announce itself. Eve mentioned her master, said he couldn't be measured by simple standards. Shiori filed it away. Eve could see her doing it, cataloging, connecting, building a picture of something larger. The 2 worlds had touched. My story and the hero story, running parallel since the day the goddess threw me away, had finally crossed paths. Neither side knew what it meant yet. Eve carried me and Slay back to the cave. I didn't argue. I couldn't have walked if I'd wanted to. Saris was waiting at the cave entrance. Dead monsters lay in a radius around it. Arrow wounds in the forehead, sword cuts to the throat. She'd been busy. Toka Dono, she said. You're alive. Barely. Liz appeared behind her. Her eyes went to Slay first. The little white mascot form, limp, bandaged crudely by Eve during the walk back. Liz's face crumpled. Su-chan, Saris treated Slay's wounds, cleaned them, wrapped them with the methodical precision of a knight trained in field medicine. Then, she turned to me and bandaged the spear wound in my shoulder, her fingers careful, her face composed, except for the slight tremor in her jaw that she thought I couldn't see. She sewed the tear in my robe. I watched her work, the lemon yellow hair catching firelight, the pointed ears twitching with concentration. She told me I was too reckless. I told her reckless would have been staying with the group and getting everyone killed. She didn't have an answer for that. She gave me the look instead, the one that said she knew I was right and hated it. I couldn't sleep. The nerves were still firing. Every sound in the forest triggered combat reflexes that hadn't shut off yet. Saras offered her knee as a pillow. I lay down and stared at the cave ceiling while her fingers rested near my hair. You're going to break, she said softly. Someday, under all this pressure. I've been broken before, I said. I know what it sounds like. Shouted words, fists on a table, a child's name used as a weapon. This isn't that. She was quiet for a long time. Then, if you're so worried about me breaking, then support me with everything you have. Don't let it happen. I will, she said. Leave it to me, Tokadono. My consciousness faded. 10 minutes. That's all I got. I woke up and something was different. Warmth on my chest where there shouldn't be any. My lips, warm, moist. Saris was lying with her back to me, her shoulders tense. Her emotions radiated through the air between us. Guilt, embarrassment, something fierce and tender that she'd never say out loud. I understood. I chose not to say anything. Still can't sleep? I asked. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. Sleep. The skill washed over her. She turned onto her back, her face relaxing, the tension draining from her body. In sleep, she looked like what she was underneath the armor and the disguise and the years of running, 19 years old. just a girl. I sat alone in the dark, listening to 4 people breathe, and realized something had changed in me. I'd fallen asleep on her lap, let my guard down completely, trusted her with my unconscious body in a demon zone surrounded by monsters. I trusted her completely, without reservation. Somewhere in the weeks of shared combat and campfires and quiet conversations and a comb stopping in lemon yellow hair, I'd stopped treating her as an ally and started treating her as something I didn't have a word for yet. Morning came quiet. The rain had stopped. The air smelled clean, like the world had washed itself and started over. We packed. We moved. The map showed our green point and the red point nearly overlapping. "We can't turn back now," I said. Eve stood beside me, the blood warrior who dreamed of a garden and a quiet house. She looked at the dark trees ahead and nodded. "Of course we can't," she said. "We entered the forbidden witch's domain. The forest fought us every step, not with monsters, with tricks, inscriptions carved into tree trunks that Ceres identified as conditional traps, old, damaged, but not dead. Stone pillars lining a narrow path, their surfaces etched with glowing formulas that pulsed when we passed. Eve noticed them first. She drew her sword. Paralyze. 10 golems froze mid-transformation, stone limbs half extended, faces forming from rock, caught between weapon and wall decoration. I left them standing. Destroying them would announce hostility to whoever built them. We needed the witch's favor, not her defenses. The forest ended at a lake. No monsters here, no golden eyes in the undergrowth, no vibrations in the dirt. The air tasted clean, impossibly clean for the demon zone. Magic essence glowed faintly in the water, casting pale light across a small cabin nestled against the shore. Eve checked the cabin, empty, unused for at least a month. Dust on every surface. But under a carpet, she found a trapdoor. Below, stone walls, silent golems standing in rows like sentries. And at the end of a corridor, a massive door with a crystal embedded in its center. The crystal wanted mana, a lot of it. I pressed my palm flat against it and poured. The door opened. What lay beyond wasn't a room. It was a world. An underground cavern so vast I couldn't see the far wall. Wind. Actual wind. Shifting directions, carrying the smell of grass and stone, vegetation, birds. A ceiling so high it mimicked a sky, lit by something I couldn't identify. And rising through the center, enormous twisted roots from the polluted tree above, their surfaces carved with stairs, terraces, and windows. Someone had been living inside them for a very long time. "Amazing," Liz whispered. A figure appeared on a high terrace, dark skin, long ears with silver earrings, purple blue eyes cold enough to freeze the air between us. She held a decorated staff and wore a dress that split at the thighs like a cheongsam. She looked down at us with the expression of someone who'd been interrupted while doing something more important. She spoke, not in our language, Ceres answered, in the same ancient tongue. The witch's eyebrows lifted a fraction. She tapped her staff once against the stone. The sound echoed through the cavern like a bell. Then she switched to common. She told us she'd been testing us, that the ancient language confirmed we carried knowledge worth her time. She introduced herself as Erica Anaorobael, the Forbidden Witch. I'd later learn that while we stood in that cavern, the fortress city of Argyle was burning. A knight named Marg Nog retreated with survivors, while a goat-headed demon called Drykova mocked them from the sky. The war wasn't coming. It had arrived. Erica wanted to know about the monster swarm. I told her my mercenary group caused it. She asked how we survived. I told her we killed them. She didn't believe me until I started explaining. I watched her face as I revealed each piece, that I was an otherworld hero, that the goddess had thrown me into a dungeon to die, that I'd survived, killed the Soul Eater, inherited the Dark Hero's forbidden knowledge, and spent the months since dismantling everything the goddess built around me. Ceres confirmed my truthfulness with a slight nod. She could read lies through her wind spirits. Erica noticed. When I said I was the goddess's enemy, something shifted in the witch's expression. Not surprise, recognition. She called Visis a damn goddess, said the word like she'd been holding it in her teeth for centuries. The goddess had tried to recruit her once. When Erica refused, she was branded with the name Forbidden and exiled to the demon zone. Centuries of isolation, centuries of waiting. We were the same kind of thing, people the goddess had tried to erase. I presented my 2 requests. First, protect Eve and Liz. Give them a home. Second, teach me forbidden curses. Eve stepped forward. She told Erica who she was. Eve Speed, daughter of Adim Speed, whose tribe had been connected to the witch through an ancestral map, the same map that led us here. Liz spoke next, quietly, about the dark elf village that was destroyed, about being sold, about the inn. She didn't cry. She stated facts with the steady calm of someone who'd survived worse than telling. Erica's cold expression cracked, not much. A tightening around the eyes. A stillness in the hand holding the staff. She'd known Eve's parents. She'd made that map for their tribe, for a plan that never came to pass because the tribe was destroyed first. She accused me of using Eve and Liz as emotional leverage. Eve cut her off before I could respond. Eve told Erica she didn't care if she was being used, that Toka had freed her from a cage, that being useful to someone who treated her as a person wasn't manipulation, it was purpose. Liz said something similar, in fewer words. She said she'd rather be used by me than saved by anyone else. Erica stared at them for a long time. Then, she invited us into her home. That night, after dinner and a bath that felt like a miracle, Erica and I sat in the room she'd given Saris and me. The walls were carved from the great root, the air cool and faintly sweet. Saris listened from the bed, combing her hair, while I laid out the full story. The Soul Eater, the 5 dragon warriors, the Asynth cursed sorcerers, every fight, every kill, every deception since the dungeon. Erica listened without interrupting, her purple eyes cataloging each detail like she was filing entries in an encyclopedia. When I finished, she asked one question. She asked how I planned to fight the goddess when vices possessed a divine protection that nullified every status ailment. Paralyze, sleep, poison, berserk, slow, all of them. Useless against her. I knew this. I'd felt it in the throne room the day she threw me away. My paralyze hadn't even reached her. She'd swatted it aside like dust, but Erica was smiling. Not smiling. She never smiled. The corners of her mouth shifted, a dry, scholarly satisfaction. She explained, divine protection nullified status ailments because they operated through the body's biological systems. Skill-based effects. Paralyze freezes muscles. Sleep shuts down consciousness. Poison attacks cells. The goddess's protection intercepted all of these at the biological layer. Forbidden curses were different. They didn't touch the body. They targeted the soul, a completely separate magical system. Operating on a vector, the goddess's divine protection wasn't designed to block. Different architecture, different defense required. I felt something click into place. Not excitement, something colder, more precise, like a chess piece sliding into position on a board I'd been studying for months. The 3 curse scrolls I'd carried since the disposal ruins. The language I couldn't read. The knowledge I'd been chasing across a continent, through cities and sewers and a demon zone and a night of blood and rain. It led here, to a witch who could teach me a way through the goddess's armor. Erica told me the scrolls were likely the last of their kind. She could help me decipher them, but it would take time I didn't have. I told her I'd take whatever she could give me. The days that followed were preparation, pure, focused, efficient. Saris taught me to ride sleigh properly, not the desperate clinging from the swarm night. Actual riding, posture, commands, weight distribution. Sleigh made it easier than it should have been. She anticipated my movements, adjusted her stride to match my shifting weight, a mount that thought alongside her rider. Erica gave Eve the transformation bracelet, 3 beads, each with a different setting. I pushed my mana into the 3rd one and watched Eve dissolve into cream-colored light. When it faded, a human woman stood where the beast woman had been, long chestnut hair to her waist, emerald eyes instead of gold, no spotted fur, no tufted ears, just a tall, striking woman who could walk into any human city without drawing a sword. Slay sniffed her, recognized her by smell, wagged her tail. Eve examined her new hands with the quiet bewilderment of someone wearing a stranger's skin. She asked if it was reversible. Erica confirmed. Mana into bead 1, back to her true form. Then, Erica led me underground, below the laboratory, through a corridor that got hotter with every step, to a room full of jars and instruments and the thick smell of old magic. She had the missing material for Pigamaru's enhancement potion, a preserved monster organ the size of a human head, kept in a glass jar on a shelf too high for her to reach. I gave her a shoulder ride. She retrieved the jar without comment. We brewed the potion in her lab, the forbidden techniques. Encyclopedia provided the formula. Erica's equipment made the process faster than I'd expected. Then we moved to a testing room, thick walls, reinforced ceiling, and fed the potion to Pigamaru. He grew, not a little, not a moderate expansion. Pigamaru filled the room. His body swelled until it pressed against the ceiling, dense and enormous, his color shifting from happy pink to a deep, determined green, a slime the size of a small building, temporary, controllable, and devastating. When I told him to shrink, he did. Back to the small, round, warm thing that rode on my shoulder and turned pink when Liz fed him pudding. New weapon, forged in a witch's lab from ingredients I'd gathered across an entire continent. Over the next several days, Eve and Saris sparred against monsters outside. I trained with both of them, sharpening what I already knew. My shoulder healed faster than expected. Slay's injuries closed. Even Pigamaru's color came back to full brightness. War news arrived through Erika's familiars. The Demon Emperor's army was advancing south. The Bakuos Empire sent new warriors, 3 dragon warriors, to replace the 5 I'd killed. The goddess pitted Nea against Bakuos, promising independence to whoever contributed more to the war. She turned her own allies into competitors, because that was what she did. Every relationship was leverage. Every person was a tool. Ceres listened to the Nea reports with her comb stopped in her hair. Princess Catlia was leading Nea's forces. Ceres didn't say anything. She didn't need to. The room Erika gave us had a window carved into the root wall, underground, but the view showed moonlight, artificial, beautiful in a way that felt borrowed, like something from a science fiction film projected onto ancient stone. Ceres and I lay in the dark, her on the bed, me beside her, staring at the fake sky. "What will you do?" she said. "When the revenge is over?" I thought about it. Actually thought about it, which was rare. I'd spent so long thinking about how to destroy the goddess that the question of what came after felt like looking past the edge of a cliff into fog. "Go home," I said. "My world. There's an uncle and aunt I need to thank." And then, I don't know. Ceres was quiet for a while. Then she turned toward me. I felt the shift in the mattress, the faint warmth of her breath. "I'm already dead," she said. "To the world. Ceres Ashrain died the day Nea fell. What's left is someone who exists for one purpose." She paused. "Your purpose, Tokadono." The words were warm. The meaning underneath them was not. She was telling me she had no future of her own, that she'd poured everything into my mission because there was nothing left to pour into herself. Devotion that looked like love but felt like surrender. "That's not enough," I said. "It is for me. It shouldn't be." She didn't answer. The moonlight caught the edge of her ear, the long, elegant point she spent every waking hour disguising. She looked exhausted. The spirit magic that maintained her disguise drained her constantly, and she slept only when I forced it. "Sleep," I said. The skill washed over her. Her eyes closed. The tension left her shoulders. Her breathing slowed and deepened until she looked like what she was beneath the armor and the alias and the years of running. A 19-year-old girl who'd forgotten how to rest on her own. I sat in the dark and listened to her breathe. I'd later learn that while Ceres slept, Ayaka was riding west toward the Magnar capital with the goddess's army behind her. The goddess had pulled her aside, told her that an S-rank hero without an awakened unique skill was a waste of resources, a drag on morale, a problem she expected Ayaka to solve. Banewolf intervened. He told the goddess that Ayaka was training harder than anyone. The goddess smiled and walked away, and Banewolf told Ayaka something that stayed with me when I heard it later. He said the goddess was agitated, not about the war, about the Black Dragon Knights, about the Asynth, about a group that called itself the Fly King's Battle Group, which had appeared in Monroy and vanished without a trace after destroying everything the goddess had built there. She didn't know who we were, but she knew we existed, and it was making her afraid. Good. I found Erika on the terrace overlooking the cavern the next morning. She was watching the artificial dawn with a silver cup in her hand. She asked how my wounds were healing. I told her they were fine. She nodded. Then she said something I didn't expect. She told me she'd been watching our group, watching how Eve laughed during training, how Liz slept without flinching for the first time, how Ceres combed her hair by the fire with a softness she'd probably forgotten she had. Then she said she'd been watching me. She told me I showed satisfaction in combat, warmth toward my companions, determination toward my enemies, but I never smiled. Not once. Not the way a person smiles when they're happy, when the world is briefly, simply good. She asked me if I knew that. I didn't answer, because she was right, and there was nothing to say about it. The boy who'd been beaten until smiling meant flinching, who'd learned that showing happiness made you a target. That boy had grown into a man who could plan a war, but couldn't remember what joy felt like without a weapon in his hand. Erika turned back to the dawn. She didn't push. She didn't offer comfort. She just let the observation sit between us, like something heavy that neither of us wanted to pick up. The Forbidden Witch, the never-smiling Avenger. Two people the goddess had tried to erase, standing in an underground world that mimicked a sky, watching a sunrise that wasn't real. We had everything we needed. Pigamaru enhanced, Slay rideable, Eve transformed, forbidden curses within reach. Eve and Liz had a home. The war was escalating. The goddess was looking for us, the calm before the storm. I didn't know it then, but it was the last quiet morning I'd have for a very long time. Ceres was praying when I found her, not in the open. In the corridor outside our room, back against the carved root wall, knees drawn to her chest. She was holding the necklace Catleya had given her, a thin silver chain with a small sapphire pendant that caught the artificial moonlight. Her lips moved without sound. I'd seen Ceres fight monsters twice her size without blinking. I'd seen her stand unflinching beside a nightmare creature covered in sewn-shut human faces. I'd watched her maintain a magical disguise that drained her life force every waking hour and never once complained, but her hands were shaking. I asked if she was worried. She straightened immediately, smoothed the front of her robe, and told me Katlia would be fine, that the princess had the strongest holy knights in Ni, that the southern army hadn't fully engaged yet, that there was nothing to worry about. She was the worst liar I'd ever met, and I'd met professional ones. "You're not sleeping," I said. "You're not eating full meals. Every time Erica's familiar brings a war report, you stop whatever you're doing and your comb freezes in your hair. Toka Dono, I assure you, you told me you were already dead, that everything you had was mine, your purpose, your power, your life." I leaned against the opposite wall and looked at her. "But you can't even pray for Katleya without your hands shaking." She didn't answer. The sapphire pendant trembled against her chest. "Go ahead and be selfish for once," I said. "Just this once. Tell me what you actually want." She broke, not violently, not dramatically. Her shoulders folded inward and her face crumpled, and the tears came in silence. The kind of crying that happens when someone has been holding it together so long that the collapse doesn't make a sound. Her body shook, her breathing hitched. She pressed the necklace against her mouth and cried the way a 19-year-old cries when the person she loves most in the world might die without ever knowing she's alive. "I want to see her," Ceres whispered. "I want to tell her I'm sorry, that I never stopped thinking about her, that the goodbye we had wasn't enough." She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "I want to say farewell properly, even if it's the last thing I do." I stood there for a long time. The artificial moonlight shifted across the walls. In the cavern below, something stirred and went quiet. Ceres had given me everything: her sword, her sleep, her name. She'd followed me through cities and sewers, and a demon zone, and a night of blood and rain. She'd never asked me for a single thing. This was the first time. "Then we go," I said. "We infiltrate the southern army as mercenaries. I'll get you to Katlia." Her eyes widened. "But your mission? The mission doesn't change. There are enemies at the front I want to deal with anyway. But the route changes. We go through the northern demon zone, link up with the southern army, and you get your farewell." I paused. "Besides, an Avenger who can't fight for the people he cares about isn't much of an Avenger." Ceres stared at me. Then she pressed the necklace to her chest, bowed her head, and said, "Yes, just yes." One word with her whole body behind it. We went to Erica. The Forbidden Witch didn't try to stop us. She called us idiots, pulled out a map of the northern demon zone with routes based on her familiar's reconnaissance, and spent the next hour explaining which areas to avoid. The northern zone had stronger demons than the south, more concentrated, more territorial. I told her if the obstacle was monsters, we'd eliminate them all. Erica gave us the demon chariot, a black vehicle with concealment magic that would mask our presence from monsters. It had maybe half a trip's worth of stealth left before the power ran out. Slay would pull it. Erica also provided custom robes made from black lion spider silk, fire-resistant and durable, and enough weapons to arm a small company. Eve insisted on coming. She told me she owed Ceres for protecting Liz during the demon zone crossing, that this was her debt to pay. I gave her the teleport stone as insurance. One use left, enough to send her back to Erica's if things went wrong. We departed at dawn, the Fly King's battle group, riding into the demon zone in a black chariot, toward a war we had no stake in, for the sake of one woman's goodbye. The northern demon zone tried to kill us within the first hour. Slay pulled the chariot at full speed, her 8 legs tearing through mud and undergrowth. The concealment held for the first stretch. Monsters passed within yards of us and didn't register our presence, but the northern zone was denser than the south. More golden eyes, more vibrations in the ground. When the concealment wore off, everything came at once. A giant horned gorilla, 8 meters tall, nearly as big as Pigmeru's giantification, burst from the trees and charged the chariot. I hit it with berserk. It turned on its own pack and tore them apart while we raced past. Ceres fired crossbow bolts from the chariot roof. Eve swung a spiked iron ball on a chain, crushing faces and breaking necks. A small purple demon clung to the railing, and Ceres skewered it. Its acidic blood melted the metal where it fell. 2 unicorn monsters shot their horns at Slay. She deflected them with her own horns and kept running. Ceres and Eve killed both before they could regenerate. Then Slay hit a root. The chariot jumped. Eve went airborne. "Pigmeru?" He launched a tentacle rope before I even finished the word. Caught Eve mid-fall, wrapped around her waist. I grabbed the other end and hauled her back onto the chariot with one arm. The spiked iron ball clanged against the railing and nearly took my ear off. "Thanks," Eve said. "If you fall, Pigmeru and I will pull you up, so fight to your heart's content." She almost smiled. Almost. We were 2 days into the northern zone when Erica's familiar found us, the white bird, exhausted, carrying one final message before Erika collapsed from the strain of long-range communication. The White Castle was under siege. The Great Demon Emperor's forces had attacked from multiple fronts: monsters, ogre soldiers, and at least 2 side close-level demons. The Alliance was fighting outside the walls, and Catleya's Nia army was there. Saris went still when she heard. I changed course. We abandoned the original plan, infiltrating the Southern Army as mercenaries, and aimed straight for the White Castle. Full speed, no stops. The chariot bounced and groaned. Sleigh ran harder. Monster attacks thinned as we got closer to the castle. Most of them had already converged on the battle. I pulled out the Fly King mask and turned it over in my hands. When we arrive, I said, I'm not Toka Mimori. I'm Belzegia, leader of the Fly King's battle group, formerly of the Curse Technique Guild Asynth. Eve nodded. Saris touched her sword hilt. And the golems? Erika's last resort. They only target golden-eyed monsters. Limited duration. We deploy them the moment we clear the demon zone. I put the mask on. The painted mandibles spread across my face. The compound insect eyes stared back at nothing. The boy the goddess threw away was about to save her heroes, and she would never know it was him. I'd later learn what happened at the White Castle before I arrived. It started with a sound. Early morning, thick fog, a scream-like noise that ripped across the landscape and attracted every monster in the zone. The ground shook. Golden-eyed creatures swarmed the walls from every direction. A giant dragonfly monster breached the main wall. Ogre soldiers infiltrated from the south. A sphere-shaped creature with multiple human upper bodies attached to it appeared and began eating black dragon knights whole. Baha, the new Dragon Knight commander, was devoured alive, screaming for help as the sphere pulled him in. Then, the human-faced species arrived, 3 of them, emerging from the deeper demon zone, a lion with a human face and an expression of frozen terror. They were stronger than anything the Alliance had fought. Banewolf transformed. The Dragon Slayer, the man who'd volunteered to train Ayaka's dropout group when nobody else would, activated the power he'd gained from bathing in dragon blood. His body warped. Scales erupted across his skin. His frame expanded, twisted, became something between human and dragon. He grabbed his massive sword and stood between the human-faced creatures and the retreating soldiers. His body broke under the strain. Joints cracked. Muscles tore. He was destroying himself to buy minutes, not hours, minutes. Ajito ordered the retreat. Everyone fell back toward the northern gate. Abyss died next, the strongest of the 4 sacred saints. The human-faced creature appeared behind her mid-fight and ate her lower half. She was gone in seconds. Koyamada saw it happen. The class bully who'd harassed Ayaka on the bus. The A-rank hero who'd mocked everyone weaker than him. He saw Abyss disappear into a monster's mouth, and his mind snapped. He screamed, a raw, animal sound that had nothing to do with bravery, and ran into the dust, into the chaos. Gone. Brown of the 4 sacred saints appeared from the south wall, missing an arm. He asked about his brothers. A thread weasel monster sliced his head in 2 before he finished the sentence. Then, Anne arrived, and Tamahiro, a rank, Black Flame, the classmate who'd smiled to my face before the disposal and thought I was garbage in his heart. He intervened with a blast of black fire that drove back the thread weasel. He struck a pose, declared his superiority. The thread weasel played dead. When Anne turned away, it lunged, took 3 of his fingers, and looked at his hand, looked at the blood, looked at the monsters pressing in from every side, and he ran. He climbed onto a captured army horse and rode north, alone. Ayaka called after him. She begged him to stay. She told him they needed every fighter. He told her that B-rank trash didn't give orders to an A-rank hero, that the world needed him alive, that everyone was responsible for their own survival. He left them all, and rode away without looking back. I'd later learn what happened next. Ayaka held the line, with Banewolf crippled, with Abyss dead, with Brown dead, with Koyamada broken, with Anne gone, with monsters pressing from the south, and ogre soldiers breaking through the northern gate, with everything falling apart around her. She told her group to form a circle, the formation Banewolf had taught them. She put the weaker fighters in the center and took the outside position herself. Panicked heroes from other groups stumbled into her formation, crying, screaming. She told them to pick up their weapons and fight. That giving up was something they could do after she was dead. Strong Oni creatures surrounded them. 3 horns, 4 horns, bigger, faster, meaner than anything they'd faced. Ayaka fought them with her spear, but they were too many and too powerful. Then she remembered her grandmother, the old woman who'd taught her the spear style she'd practiced since childhood. the forbidden technique she'd been warned never to use. Extreme string, a martial art that imagined a thread running through the body, controlling every muscle, amplifying speed and power beyond human limits at the cost of tearing yourself apart. Ayaka activated it. She moved like something had broken loose inside her. The Oni couldn't track her. She tore through them. 1, 2, 5. The spear blurring in her hands. Her body pushed past every safety threshold her muscles had. The Oni leader charged. She killed it in a single strike. And in that moment, under maximum despair, surrounded by the dead, leading the people nobody else would protect, her unique skill awakened. Armed battle formation. A silver sphere materialized beside her. She didn't understand it at first. Then, she threw her spear to save a classmate and found herself unarmed. The sphere transformed into a sword and flew to her hand. She killed 3 monsters before she realized what was happening. The skill created weapons, on demand. Any weapon she could imagine. Swords, spears, axes, scythes. They resized to match the enemy. A giant monster needed a giant blade. The blade grew. The weight didn't change. She could swing a weapon the size of a building like it weighed nothing. Ayaka carved through the battlefield. Silver light wrapped around her like armor. Weapons appeared and vanished as she needed them, reshaping mid-swing to match whatever she was killing. She fought toward the northern gate. She found survivors. She gathered them. The city lord, Gira, died from his wounds while they passed. Classmate Ikumi had been killed and abandoned by the Kirihara group during the retreat. Maroda from that group found Ayaka, her eyes empty, and told her they'd left Ikumi to die because they were scared. Ayaka didn't judge her. She told her to pick up a weapon. 3 wounded human-faced species appeared from the south, the ones Banewolf had fought. They were hurt, bleeding blue, but still terrifying. One of them threw human heads at the group, including White of the 4 sacred saints. Ayaka killed all 3, but then a massive wave of monsters closed from both directions, south and north, surrounded. No escape, no reinforcements. She told her group that if they were going to give up, they should do it after she was dead. I thought about that line for a long time after I heard it, because I'd said something similar in the disposal ruins, standing over the bones of heroes the goddess had thrown away. Both of us, the E rank and the S rank, proving the system wrong under impossible pressure. Both of us disposable in different ways. Both of us refusing to stay down. The goddess's crystal had measured us both and decided our worth. It was wrong both times. Catalia's holy knights arrived first. They hit the ogre soldiers from behind, and suddenly the pressure eased. Ayaka's group could breathe. Black Dragon Knight Gas led aerial support. The remaining heroes rallied. Lower rank classmates I'd never thought would fight picked up weapons and charged. Kayako coordinated from the center. Nebe, who'd been crying 10 minutes earlier, raised his sword and led a group toward the gate. Then Zvikeseed appeared, the Demon Emperor's second oath, a goat-headed creature, 7 meters tall, 4 horns curving from his skull. He looked at the battlefield, looked at the heroes, and identified Ayaka as the biggest threat. They fought, a stalemate. Ayaka, in her extreme string state, armed battle formation, generating weapons faster than Zvikeseed, could destroy them. His blood-forged scythes against her silverlight blades. Neither could finish the other. Then Eingrans arrived, the first oath, higher than Zvikeseed. He rode a throne carried by monsters, flanked by a massive army of ogre soldiers he'd created from nothing. He brought a device, a bowl-shaped construct with lips glowing purple, and announced it would summon every monster in the demon zone directly to the battlefield. 10 minutes to activation. Catalia ordered the charge. Everything they had, every knight, every soldier, every hero, full assault on the device. No defense, no reserve. Destroy it before it activates. It was a trap. The activation time was a lie. The device triggered immediately. Purple light erupted from the bowl, and a fresh wave of monsters poured out of the demon zone, hitting the Alliance's undefended flank. They'd abandoned their positions to charge, exactly as Eingrans planned. Zvikeseed exploited the chaos. He caught Ayaka off guard, slashed her with a blood scythe. She staggered. The Alliance was collapsing, again, worse than before. Then the golems hit. Stone figures, 20 of them, erupting from the tree line and smashing into the ogre soldier's flank. They didn't attack humans. They didn't attack Nia's knights. They targeted only the golden-eyed monsters, carving through the demon horde with stone fists the size of carriages. A black chariot burst from the demon zone, pulled by an 8-legged demonic horse with burning red eyes and horns that gleamed in the firelight. On the chariot stood 2 figures in matching robes. One wore a mask, a fly mask, horns curving upward, compound insect eyes painted in black and gold, mandibles spread in a permanent snarl. I stood on that chariot and addressed the battlefield through the amplification stone. I am Belzagia, leader of the Fly King's battle group. The Demon Emperor's forces on this battlefield will be trampled. The humans didn't know who I was. They didn't care. Golems were killing monsters, and that was enough. I dropped from the chariot and mounted sleigh, sent Eve to support the flanks. Then I turned to Saris. Go, I said. Find Katlia, protect her. Saris looked at me, through the mask, through the disguise, through everything I'd built between myself and the world. She saw me, and she nodded. May fortune favor you, Toka Dono, she whispered. She rode toward the Nea banner. I rode toward Eingrance. The first oath of the demon emperor sat on his throne, like a king surveying peasants. 8 horns, massive frame, evil king element radiating from his body, a pressure wave designed to paralyze anyone from this world within 200 meters. It didn't touch me. The evil king element didn't affect otherworld heroes. Eingrance didn't know that. I rode sleigh straight toward him, dismounted 50 meters out, walked closer. He spoke, mocked me, called the Fly King's battle group an insignificant nuisance, asked if I really thought golems and a mask could stand against the demon emperor's first oath. I told him I was Belzeja, formerly of the Asynth Curse Technique Guild, that my techniques operated on a different principle than anything he'd encountered. I sounded arrogant, deliberately. I wanted him angry. He unleashed his evil king element at full force. 200 meters of crushing demonic pressure, enough to drop every soldier on the field. I fell forward, not because it affected me, because I needed to be closer. I stumbled, staggered, dropped to one knee, let my body language scream that I was overwhelmed. 20 meters. That was the range. I just needed 20 meters. Eingrance watched me crawl. He was satisfied. The arrogant insect, brought low by the first oath's power. He started a speech, something about despair and harvest and the futility of human resistance. 15 meters. I looked up. Through the mask's eye holes, I met his gaze. Paralyze. The word crossed 15 meters like a bullet. Eingrance froze. Every muscle locked. His speech died mid-syllable. His 8 horns trembled, but didn't move. His eyes, the only thing still mobile, went wide with confusion, then rage, then something I recognized. Fear. Eve threw a spear. It struck his chest, testing his reaction speed. Nothing. He couldn't dodge, couldn't block, couldn't move. Berserk. The skill hit him while he was still paralyzed. His own monstrous strength turned inward, tearing at muscles that couldn't move to release the energy. I walked closer, pulled the sword from my belt. He tried to speak, tried to tell me this was impossible, that no one could lock down the demon emperor's first oath, that his evil king element should have destroyed me. Unfortunately, I said, that's exactly what it is. Eve struck from the left. I struck from the right. The demon general who'd orchestrated the siege, who'd deployed the monster summoning device, who'd lied about the activation time to bait an entire alliance into a trap. He died on his knees, paralyzed, unable to lift a finger. My status screen flickered, level 2112 to level 2500, 388 levels, from a single kill. The EXP flooded in like cold water, MP fully restored, body surging with recovered power. Slay whinnied twice, the signal. Eve heard it from across the battlefield and knew what it meant. The first oath was dead. Zweigseed felt it. Some connection between him and Eingrance severed, and the goat-headed demon whipped around, abandoning his duel with Ayaka to rush toward his fallen master. He didn't make it. Ayaka was behind him. Armed battle formation generated a cross-shaped blade in her hands. Massive, gleaming, impossibly fast. She swung once, twice. An X carved through the air. Zweigseed fell in pieces. The ogre soldiers faltered. Without their generals, the chain of command shattered. Some fought on. Most broke and ran. The golems chased them until their operational timers expired and they crumbled to dust. Human forces regrouped. Knights, soldiers, heroes. They poured into the gap and pushed the remaining monsters back toward the demon zone. It was messy. It was brutal. People died even in the cleanup. But the momentum had shifted. I avoided using my skills where classmates might see. Rode sleigh through the chaos, cutting down ogre soldiers with a sword, letting Eve handle the ones who got too close. Just another masked mercenary in a chaotic battle. Nobody special. The fighting died in stages. First, the ogre soldiers broke completely. Then, the monster waves thinned as the device's summoning effect faded. Finally, the human-faced species retreated into the demon zone, dragging their wounded. The White Castle still stood, barely. Walls breached, gates broken, dead piled in the streets. But the knee banner flew, Katlia's banner. I found Ayaka before I left the field. She was standing near the northern gate, using a crutch. The extreme string technique had torn her body apart from the inside. Muscles, tendons, joints all screaming. She'd pushed herself past every limit and was paying for it now, but she was alive. Her group was alive. The classmates who'd followed her were alive. I approached her as Belzegia, voice altered by the amplification stone, mask covering everything. She thanked me, bowed despite the pain, and said the Fly King's battle group had saved them. I asked about her unique skill. listened as she described armed battle formation, the weapon creation, the resizing, the silver sphere. She explained it earnestly, without boasting, like a student giving a report. She hadn't changed. The same girl who'd stood up on the bus when Koyamada was bullying someone. The same girl who'd been beaten unconscious by the goddess for trying to save me. She told me Koyamada and An were missing, that she was worried about them, even Anne, even the coward who'd left them to die. She said she'd decided to become the strongest hero, not for the goddess, not for the ranking, for her classmates, so nobody else would die. I looked at her through the mask and thought about the disposal ruins, about standing in the dark with Pigimaru on my shoulder, surrounded by the bones of heroes the goddess had thrown away, about deciding to live, and then to fight, and then to destroy everything the goddess had built. Ayaka had made the same choice, different circumstances, same fire. You should help the others, I said. They need you more than I do. She nodded, limped away on her crutch, silver sphere hovering at her shoulder, toward the sound of her classmates calling her name. Catleya's tent was quiet. I left Eve and Slay outside and entered alone. 2 holy knights flanked the princess. Sarah stood beside her, and for the first time since I'd known her, she wasn't wearing the disguise. No human rounded ears. No exhausted maintenance of spirit magic, just Saris Ashrain, lemon yellow hair, pointed elf ears, blue eyes, standing in her true form beside the person she'd left behind. Saris whispered an apology. She'd revealed her identity to Catalia without asking me first. I told her there was nothing to apologize for. Catalia was younger than I expected. Silver hair and vertical curls, gray eyes, luxurious armor that was dented and bloodstained from the battle. She carried herself like someone who'd been trained to lead since birth, composed, dignified, watching me with the careful assessment of a woman who'd survived an invasion and a siege in the same year. I knelt and introduced myself as Belzegia. Catalia thanked me for saving her army. She used Saris's lie detection, touching her right ear for truth, left for lie, to confirm my sincerity when I said I was an enemy of the goddess. She showed no love for Visas. That, Saris confirmed, was truth. We discussed logistics. I told her we would leave the next morning, that we'd claim to head north but actually go west, to misdirect anyone tracking us. She agreed to have her knights collect the wreckage of the demon chariot and destroy it. No evidence, no trail. Sarah said she would stay with me. No hesitation, no doubt. Catlia looked at her, looked at me. Then she smiled. A warm, private smile that had nothing to do with politics or war. She said something about mutual affection being a wonderful thing. Saras's ears turned red. Then Catleya asked for a moment alone with Saras. I left the tent, stood outside in the evening air with Eve and the small Saint Knight commander, Makia, a dark-haired woman in gothic Lolita armor, who was older than she looked and sharp as a blade. She questioned me politely. I answered carefully. She thanked me for bringing Saras back, even briefly. I didn't hear what Saras and Catleya said to each other. I didn't need to. When Saras emerged, her eyes were red, and she was holding the sapphire necklace tight enough to leave marks on her palm. She'd said goodbye, properly this time, the way she'd needed to since the day Nea fell. She looked at me and straightened her spine. I'm ready, Tokadono. I nodded. Makia approached with news. Ayaka wanted to meet Belzegia. I considered it, gathered what intelligence I could from the conversation, hero deployments, skill descriptions, who was where, and left her with the same impression everyone else had. The Fly King's battle group, mysterious, powerful, hostile to demons, nothing more. Banewolf was found alive, crippled from the transformation. His body had paid the price for those minutes he'd bought, but breathing. The mentor who'd chosen his students over himself. Eve and I set up a tent near the wreckage. I froze the remains of the demon chariot with my new skill, ice spreading across the metal until it turned brittle and shattered into powder. Erica's custom spear, same treatment. Every piece of evidence, destroyed. No trail back to the Forbidden Witch. Saras returned from a farewell meeting with Duke Polari. Catleya had arranged it to strengthen Nia's political position, gifting him the horse Saras had ridden. The princess was a strategist even in grief. Then, in the quiet of the tent, I activated the teleport stones, the last of Erica's gifts, one use each. Eve, Saras, Pigamaru, Slay, and I. The battlefield dissolved. The White Castle vanished. The war continued without us. We landed in Erica's underground cavern, artificial sky overhead, the smell of old magic and carved root, home, or the closest thing any of us had to one. The Fly King's battle group had entered the war. The goddess's heroes had been saved by the man she'd thrown away. 3 of her champions were dead. Abyss, Brown, White. Her strongest mentor was crippled. Her system had failed to protect the people it was designed for, and a masked stranger had appeared from nowhere, turned the battle, and vanished. Level 2500. 3 seeds resolved. Saras had her goodbye. Ayaka had her power. The Fly King had his debut. And somewhere, in a palace I'd never seen, A goddess was about to read a report about a battle group she couldn't explain. A man she'd thrown away, wearing a mask she'd never recognize, fighting a war she'd never understand. Good. Liz was waiting at the cavern entrance with 2 golems flanking her like stone guardians. She saw us before we saw her. The teleport stone had dropped us at the preset clearing, artificial sky shifting to dusk above. Liz came running, apron flying behind her, small feet slapping stone. "You came back," she said, not shouting, not crying, just that. Eve caught her, dropped to one knee, and pulled Liz against her chest. Pigamaru bounced free from my robe and landed on Liz's shoulder, turning bright pink. Slay nuzzled the top of Liz's head with that soft chiming sound she saved for people she trusted. We were home. Erica was bedridden. The familiar strain from the White Castle had hollowed her out. Purple blue eyes, sharp as ever, body beneath them spent. Saris knelt beside the bed, both knees, head bowed, the posture of a knight, reporting a debt she could never repay. She thanked Erica formally, vowed to repay the favor in any form. Erica flicked her on the forehead. "Get up, you're making me feel old." We set up the Kokuri-san system that evening. Parchment with the world's alphabet, yes and no in large characters. Erica's familiars could point to letters without speaking. No voice, no strain. Slower than conversation, but it wouldn't put her in bed for 3 days. I explained the priority targets. Ayaka first, the Takao sisters next, then Kirihara. Any reports about the Fly King's battle group? Erica spelled out UNDERSTOOD on the parchment. I found Eve that evening on the terrace. Below, Liz was feeding Pigamaru something sweet. Eve watched her with an expression I'd never seen on a gladiator's face. Softness, unguarded. "Our journey ends here," I said. Her ears flattened. "Was there a problem with my performance?" "No, you fought well. Every debt between us is settled." "Then why?" "Because where I'm going next is worse than anything we've faced. The farthest country, where the forbidden curses originated. I won't take Liz there, and I won't separate you from her." Her hand went to her sword. "Habit." "She never had happy memories," I said. "Not with her village, not with the innkeeper. The only good thing that happened to her was you. Give her what I got from my aunt and uncle, a home, someone who stays." Eve looked down at Liz. The girl was laughing at Pigamaru, who'd turned himself green pretending to be a vegetable. "She would tell me to go with you," Eve said quietly. "She'd sacrifice her own happiness so I could keep fighting. She would. Don't let her." Silence. Then Eve's voice, rough. "When you return, I expect a full report. Every battle, every time that slime does something ridiculous." She paused. "And if you get yourself killed, I will find you in whatever afterlife this world has and drag you back by the collar." Noted. She walked toward the stairs, stopped, and looked back. My lord. First time she'd said it without irony. I spent the next morning with Liz. She told me about her days at Erica's, the golems that followed her everywhere, the room with fake stars, the recipes Erica left bookmarked in ways that looked accidental, but weren't. She didn't cry when I told her I was leaving. She squeezed her hands together until the knuckles went white. "Will you come back?" "I'll come back. That's not a promise, it's a plan." She smiled, small, real, the kind that costs something when you're used to being left behind. Erica found me on the terrace that afternoon. She'd managed to walk, leaning on her staff. "You never smile," she said. Same observation as before, same flat delivery. "I know. Even now, watching them, you look satisfied, but you don't smile. Not once." She tapped her staff against the railing. "One day, Toka, I want to see a real one, the kind that has nothing to do with killing. When the goddess falls," I said, "I'll try." We departed the next morning. Erica met us at the lakeside cabin, Eve beside her, arms crossed, Liz holding Eve's hand. Erica handed me a map of the Western Monster Zone and the routes toward the farthest country. Safe passages, water sources, areas where the forbidden race had been sighted decades ago. "The king of the farthest country knew me," she said. "Use my name. If the throne hasn't changed, you'll get cooperation." Then she said, "About Visus, I vowed, when she exiled me to this place, that I would never laugh again, not until the day she is utterly defeated. Centuries, Toka, centuries of silence, because some vows are the only weapon you have left when everything else has been taken. The forbidden witch, centuries alone in an underground world with an artificial sky. She'd given up joy as a declaration of war. I'll give you a reason to break that vow," I said. Saris bowed deep. Eve punched her own chest. The gladiator's salute. Liz waved with both hands. Slay carried us out of the cavern, past the lake, into daylight. I looked back once. The cabin sat beside the water, small and quiet. Inside, 3 people I cared about would be safe. Then I looked forward. The Western Monster Zone stretched to the horizon, darker than the north, the air thick with old magic. Beyond it, the farthest country, knowledge that could crack the armor around a goddess. "Just the 2 of us now," I said. "Where you go, I go," Saris confirmed. Slay broke into a run, the Fly King's battle group. reduced to its core. A man and his knight, a slime on a shoulder, a horse with too many legs, 3 curse scrolls, and a war that was just beginning. I'd later learn that a goddess read a report that day. In a palace of white marble, Goddess Visis picked up a field dispatch from the White Castle. It described a group that appeared from nowhere. Golems, a black chariot, a masked leader called Belzegia of the former Asynth Curse Technique Guild. The Fly King's battle group had killed the First Oath, Eingrans. Their golems targeted only golden-eyed monsters. They vanished without explanation. She read it twice, set it down. Truly interesting. The goddess who threw me away had learned that something she couldn't explain was hunting her. She didn't know the Fly King was the E-rank hero she'd discarded. She didn't know the man behind the mask had crawled out of her disposal dungeon, killed her dragon knights, destroyed her assassins, and saved her heroes wearing the face of a demon lord. But she knew he existed, and that was the beginning. I'd later learn what happened to the heroes. They returned to Alien in pieces, Banewolf, alive, bandaged, left arm useless. He apologized to Ayaka from a cot, the dragon slayer who transformed himself into a monster to buy minutes for a retreat. His body had paid the bill. Koyamada was found in the castle dungeon, not wounded, crouching in a corner, screaming when soldiers approached. The bully who'd swaggered through training, his mind had retreated somewhere it couldn't be reached, and demanded healing for his fingers. He'd been found days later, starving. He told the messengers to deliver his words to the goddess without changing a letter, that he was a senior hero who'd survived through determination. He didn't mention the classmates he'd abandoned. Then, Kirihara arrived. He walked into the square in golden armor and looked at Ayaka, on a crutch, torn apart by extreme string, and smiled. He told her he'd heard about the second oath, said it was impressive. Then, he checked her level, 499. His expression shifted. The attack came without warning. His sword swung at Ayaka's neck, with killing intent, so thick, the air turned cold. Not a spar, a full-force strike at a woman on a crutch. Sei's blade caught it. Metal shrieked. Sei had moved before the swing completed, intercepting at the last moment. She stood between Kirihara and Ayaka, her calm expression replaced by something harder. What was that? Kirihara sheathed his sword. Casual. He called it a test, practical training for the Demon Emperor fight. Then Murota appeared, a girl from Kirihara's group, eyes red and empty. She asked about Ikumi, their classmate, the one his group abandoned during the retreat, the one who died alone. Kirihara told her that cutting losses was necessary for growth, that Ikumi's death was regrettable but acceptable. Murota stood there crying, telling him Ikumi was her friend, and he was talking about her like a number. He walked away. His group followed, hesitant, uncertain, but following, because he was S-rank, because power was the only language this world respected. Then, Shiori moved. Takao Sei found Ayaka alone that evening. She brought recommendations: reorganize the group into 3 teams, appoint sub-leaders, build a structure that would protect the weaker members. Ayaka agreed. Then Shiori said something else. She told Ayaka she had feelings for her, romantic feelings. Said it quietly, carefully. Ayaka was confused, started to respond. Shiori leaned closer and whispered, "That was for the ears listening at the door. If anyone asks why I visit you privately, that's the reason they'll believe." The goddess's people were eavesdropping. A romance between heroes was harmless, nothing to investigate. Underneath the cover story, Shiori told Ayaka the real reason she'd come. She said she might know a way home, a way back to their world, one that didn't require defeating the Demon Emperor, one that didn't rely on the goddess at all. She didn't explain how. She planted the seed and let it sit, because the goddess's entire system rested on one promise: defeat the Demon Emperor and I'll send you home. It was the leash, the leverage, the reason 40 teenagers fought and bled in a war that wasn't theirs. And Shiori was saying the leash might have a second lock, one the goddess didn't want them to find. I didn't know any of this at the time. I was riding west with Ceres at my back, chasing forbidden knowledge in a country I'd never seen. But when I heard about it later, I understood. 2 Avengers, opposite sides of the world, pulling at the same thread. The goddess sat in her white palace, reading reports about a Fly King she couldn't identify, surrounded by heroes starting to question the only promise that kept them loyal. She didn't know it yet, but the war she was losing wasn't the one against the Demon Emperor. It was the one against the people she'd underestimated, the disposed, the demoted, the discarded, the ones she'd measured with a crystal and called worthless. We were all still standing, and we were all looking at her.